and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Six o'clock, exactly, on this Monday morning. It's a new day, it's a new week. It is the 22nd of January. Breakfast here on GB News, Eamonn Holmes and Isabel Webster.
And here's what's leading the news this morning. The country's waking up to travel chaos as Storm Isha's hit. Warnings are still in place over tornadoes and danger to life winds. We'll have the latest for you throughout the programme.
How did it affect you? Let us know. And then there were two. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has dropped out of the Republican primary, clearing the way for Donald Trump to take the nomination with Nikki Haley trailing.
Another health bombshell for the royal family as Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, reveals she's been diagnosed with skin cancer just months after her breast cancer treatment.
Today marks 100 years since the first ever Labour government was elected. And with Sir Keir Starmer on a more likely path to number 10, could 2024, like 1924, be Labour's lucky year?
Paul Coates here with all your sport. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning. This is still a work in progress. So if I said the latest Premier League goal, what would you think?
Like as in time?
Yeah, well, this is it. I don't want to confuse the issue by thinking it's the latest as it was the latest one to go in,
right,
but it's the latest one that took the longest to go in.
Well, here's my point.
Yes, sir.
It's nonsense. A match is to last 90 minutes, and it doesn't really matter how you waste that time,
yes,
or use that time. 90 minutes, you blow the whistle. Maybe there's, 2 minutes injury time. This ridiculousness of adding another 10 minutes to the game. So it has to be something like 90 plus 10.
OK, I'm ready now.
Right.
Sheffield United scored the latest Premier League goal ever after 103 minutes. Liverpool score 4 away at Bournemouth, and Cameron Norrie currently playing Alexander Zverev in the Australian Open.
That's 13 minutes.
13 minutes overtime. Count them, 13. It's going crazy, isn't it? Yeah.
All you want to do is get your car to the car park and get away.
Yeah, but you get more for your money. The longer the game, the more football you get to enjoy.
That's not my tack. It's not my views.
Okay.
Too long.
OK, fine.
Nothing should last more than 90 minutes.
In
not
life.
A pantomime, not a play,
not a flight,
not a film, nothing.
Not a child's ballet show. Oh, no, they're about 5 hours, those ones. Yeah, 90 minutes.
90 minutes. OK, my friend.
How long's the show today? Anyway?
Yeah, 3.5.
Okay.
That's my point exactly. You can join any of our discussions over the next 3.5 hours. gbviews at gbnews.com.
What's our top story this morning? Winds of up to 90 miles an hour have battered the UK as Storm Isha has been sweeping across Britain.
The Met Office has warned of danger to lives from flying debris. Many people experiencing power cuts are also experiencing flooding.
And the Tornado and Storm Research Organisation has issued a tornado watch covering Northern Ireland, parts of Scotland and the Isle of Man.
Well, meteorologist Tamsin Green is with us in the studio now. Tamsin, obviously, this is, I was going to say, a different story in different parts of the country, but basically the same story in most of the country. Here in the southeast, we've been spared a lot of the worst. Where has the worst been?
Well, that's the unique and remarkable thing about Storm Isha, is that it has been so widely disruptive. We've seen widespread wind gusts of over 50 to 60 miles an hour. There's been wind gusts over 70 miles an hour, 80 miles an hour, even in Northumberland, there's been a wind gust of 99 miles an hour. So generally sort of furthest north and also western parts of Ireland have seen the strongest of the wind gusts. But on the whole, it's been a widely disruptive storm. So that's been the really quite remarkable thing of it. You know, we've seen a yellow wind warning covering the entirety of the UK, an amber wind warning covering the majority of the UK as well. And even a red weather warning was issued last night to parts of northeast Scotland.
And warnings against tornadoes, how unusual is that? And I was even reading advice last night about people being told not to sleep near windows.
Yeah, I mean, it's not quite as unusual and rare as it might seem. I think we get on average 20 tornadoes a year, but generally they're not like what you see in the States or anywhere else. You know, they're much sort of smaller scale, less impactful kind of tornadoes, really. So there was actually reports of an unconfirmed tornado so far in parts of Ireland yesterday. So that's something that actually might have happened yesterday with Storm Isha.
And in terms of the timing of this storm, the fact that it happened predominantly overnight, is that probably a blessing because there's fewer people out and about? But, I mean, how much longer is this set to last? And I think there's another storm waiting in the wings, isn't there?
Yeah, so, I mean, firstly, yes, absolutely. There is, you know, it is a very windy storm. And the duration of the storm is also what is so remarkable. It's lasted for such a long time, which is certainly remarkable for UK storms. So through this morning, it will be moderating. Like you said earlier, we were kind of spared in the southeast. We did still see wind gusts of around 50 miles an hour. But generally speaking, it is a very lengthy storm. So we're going to be seeing winds moderating through the course of this morning. It will still remain windy, particularly for northern areas. And then winds will slowly sort of ease off a little bit later. And then, like you said, waiting in the wings is potentially another storm system. There's already yellow wind warnings in force. It's not unlikely that we could see Storm Jocelyn be named for that.
It is continually confusing, of course. We have the bad weather, the rough weather, but the temperature has changed somewhat from what it was a week ago. Much warmer, much milder.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's a good news or bad news. You know, everyone's had all these colds and I don't know, you know, the cold weather usually kind of wipes them out, which is a good thing. But I personally quite like the cold weather. It's been very cold. It's been temperatures, you know, 5 degrees, 6 degrees below average. Now we're going the opposite end of the scale and we're seeing temperatures rise 5, 6 degrees above average when they were below average before. So, yeah, we are now seeing a milder theme. We're not seeing particularly any winter hazards on the horizon at the moment. It is staying in a milder regime moving forward.
So it's goodbye Arctic
for now.
Hello
for
jet
now.
stream, and we're at the mercy of the jet stream for now. Is it unusual the number of storms we've had? Because was it last year we only had 2 named storms, the second of which was actually in August, and we're already approaching, did you say Jocelyn was the next one? So J.
Yeah.
That's a lot for January.
Yeah, so it's actually the earliest that we've hit the letter I since storm naming began around 10 years ago or so. So we don't have too long to date back to kind of refer to records, but it is certainly remarkable. We've seen a very stormy setup over the past couple of months for sure.
OK, Tamsin, keep us posted throughout the programme this morning. For the moment, thank you very much indeed. We also want to know from you what way you've been affected by the storm. Indeed, if you still are, did you get any sleep last night because of the noise and the confusion caused by the high winds? Is it still with you today? Is it going to be with you for the rest of the day? Let us know the damage involved. gbviews@gbnews.com with pictures and stories. To the USA now, and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has dropped out of the presidential race for the Republican Party.
We can't ask our supporters to volunteer their time and donate their resources if we don't have a clear path to victory. Accordingly, I am today suspending my campaign.
Well, the Trump campaign responded with a statement saying it was time for Republicans to rally behind the former president to defeat Joe Biden.
But that wasn't before Donald Trump was filmed reacting in typical Trump fashion.
He just said, will I be using the name Ron DeSanctimonious? I said, that name is officially retired.
You think he actually would be trying to court more support or people in favour of him rather than alienating Ron DeSantis totally like that? But anyway, DeSantis' departure leaves former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley as Mr. Trump's only significant rival. Here with us this morning to go through all of this, the chair of Republican Overseas, Greg Swenson. Greg, very good to talk to you. DeSantis says he's suspending. He didn't say he's dropping out.
That's just the typical political speak when candidates drop out. So I don't think that was much of a surprise. I thought the endorsement of President Trump was somewhat moderate it wasn't like a robust endorsement. You know, he just sort of said, you know, well, I committed to, you know, I signed the pledge to, you know, to support the candidate, whoever it is. So that wasn't, I didn't feel like there was a lot of...
Yeah, but I mean, do you feel disappointed by that? Because I personally think if he's been just last week, you know, criticising Donald Trump, giving all the reasons why he shouldn't get the nomination, and then literally the following week come out and say, guys, you've got to back him all the way. Yeah. I thought it was, at least he was kind of being true to himself. Look, I signed a pledge, I'll honour that, but, you know, this isn't, he probably isn't his preferred candidate.
Yeah, it's difficult to flip that quickly, you know, and I think that's, you know, a challenge for candidates when they drop out. So, you know, I wasn't surprised with anything he said in his announcement. Disappointed, of course, but he had, you know, as he pointed out, there was really no path for Governor DeSantis to win the nomination.
If there's no path for DeSantis, is there a path for Nikki Haley?
Maybe, but I doubt it. I mean, she has a chance in New Hampshire to surprise. Right now, she's polling down 13 to 15 to President Trump. So, you know, if she really overachieves and loses by only single digits, or maybe a surprise victory. It's happened before. John McCain did it in 2008 and in 2000, actually. So, you know, there's a long shot, but it doesn't look good for Mrs. Haley. I mean, you know, especially after Iowa, Trump's coming in with momentum.
You know, Trump there with that, what did he say?
Sanctimonious
comment as well. I'm always fascinated by these things because he has to find a running partner eventually. Who would be in the running to be the running partner?
You know, there's a lot of speculation on it right now. You know, Kristi Noem, the governor of South Dakota. You've got, you know, it looks like Vivek Ramaswamy was on the short list, but is no longer, according to, you know, the rumor mill in the Trump campaign. So I think he'll pick someone who's loyal. I think that's probably the most important thing for Trump. So I doubt it would be Ron DeSantis. I doubt it would be Nikki Haley. I think it'll be potentially Ben Carson, who was in his administration before. You know, someone who is very loyal to Trump, doesn't threaten Trump, and maybe gets well set up for 2028.
Interesting.
Looking ahead at the next 5 years, and we look at the war and this pre-nuclear conflict that everyone is talking about. It looks like rough times ahead, and whoever would be the president of the most powerful nation on earth, it's not going to be an easy stint. Is Trump the right man for that? I mean, if I remember correctly, you're not necessarily a Trump man.
Right. I was supporting Ron DeSantis, and I thought Ron would be a much better president, much more disciplined, and with some of the similar characteristics of President Trump. He appeals to the populist base, but he's got a much better record as a conservative than Trump ever did. And he's, you know, again, much more disciplined. But that doesn't mean that Trump can't be a better president than Joe Biden. That's not saying much. And I think that's the advantage that President Trump has right now. Trump is only polling at 40 overall. He's maxed out at 47. He's never polled above 47. He won the election with 47 in 2016. He lost with 47. And I don't know that he gets back there because he generates so much energy on the left. But you've got Biden polling in the high 30s. On the economy, he's at 31. On the border, he's polling at 18. On foreign policy, he's in the 20s. So whoever is president, and I hope it's Trump, is going to inherit a really difficult situation.
Well, Greg, I mean, you talk about, and I've heard lots of commentary talking about as we enter this, you know, new era of sort of geopolitical instability, having Biden in position, he looks weak. What does it look like if you have a president who's in jail? Because let's not forget, that is actually a possibility.
Yeah, and I think when you see a conviction, and there will be a conviction. I mean, he's got 91 indictments, and he's got very, shall we say, hostile jury pools in New York and Washington. That's going to be difficult because, according to the polls, 10% of Republicans will not vote for him if he has a conviction, a felony conviction. Well, that's 5% of the voters, right? That could swing the election right there. So, and I think that's why DeSantis and Haley, in many respects, were playing for second because anything can happen right now. So, you know, and in many ways, the Democrats wanted Trump to be the candidate. They've elevated him with these indictments. They want him to be the nominee. That might backfire on them because Biden is doing so poorly. And foreign policy, I'm glad you brought it up, Isabel, because Normally, foreign policy is not a big issue for American voters. It's the economy. Right now, it's the economy and the border. But foreign policy has gone from 20 to 40 in terms of where people rank it. So 40% of the voters think it's the #1 issue. That's unusual in America. It's double the last time. And that's a much bigger thing. It really hasn't been the case since 2004, when George W. Bush was running for re-election. Foreign policy was a very big deal there because of Iraq and Afghanistan, and he was polling well in that area. Reagan in '84 with how he was handling the Cold War. So it's been a while, and Biden has really been a disaster in terms of foreign policy.
Greg, seriously,
Yeah.
I mean, surely to goodness, the Democratic Party cannot be saying, yeah, Joe, go again.
I know. It's a great issue
And
and
yet
great
there's no
question.
other name coming into the fray.
And that's the problem. There isn't officially a mechanism to pull Biden. If Biden wants to run, he can run. The power of incumbency is really large in the U.S. election. So the incumbent has such a great advantage, but he's so weak on so many levels. And there is no mechanism to pull him unless they get in the smoke-filled room like they did in 2020 when Bernie Sanders was clearly going to be the candidate. They get in the smoke-filled room and the party elders have to convince him not to run. I don't know that will work, but they should try because he is an electoral disaster.
Mm-hmm.
Goodness me.
Well, it's going to be interesting, that's for sure. Always lovely to talk to you, Greg.
Great
Thanks
to be
very
here.
much
Thank
indeed.
you.
Thank you very much indeed. The time, 6:15. Let's have a look at some of the other stories you're waking up to on this Monday morning.
Detectives investigating the deaths of 4 people in Norwich on Friday say 2 adults died of stab wounds. A man and a woman, along with 2 young children, were found dead in a house in Cossey. Norfolk police have referred themselves to the independent watchdog after failing to respond to a 999 call from the home where the bodies were found.
The Home Office is to use private boats at a cost of £36 million to patrol the channel for migrant crossings. The government's been forced to pay for these private vessels due to delays in a planned upgrade of the border force fleet. The contract for charter of vessels to support small boat crossings in Dover is due to run from April until March next year.
And the skies above Berlin were lit up last night as a rare meteor was spotted. Researcher Michael A., who managed to capture the moment on camera, told reporters he was just about to take his dog for a walk when a colleague told him to keep his eyes on the sky.
Everybody's eyes drawn to what was a lamppost there. The meteor is there, and then there is a lamppost sort of spoiling the picture. Sarah Ferguson has been diagnosed with skin cancer. This is just months after being treated for breast cancer.
Yes, this comes as she's had several cancerous moles removed, and a spokesperson for the Duchess of York said she's undergoing further investigations to ensure that it's been caught in the early stages.
Joining us now, the director of Bart's Cancer Centre, Professor Tom Powells, who joins us now. Professor, it's got to be a big worry in Sarah Ferguson's case. Her father had this as well.
Yeah, good morning. I think the first thing to say is that skin cancer is actually very common. There are different types of skin cancer, and there are some very non-cancerous or benign types of skin cancer. Squamous cancer, for example, is very common, and many of us have abnormal skin areas which change with time. Malignant melanoma, the one which Sarah Ferguson has been diagnosed with, and the details, of course, are not widely not known, and I don't know those details. But what is in the press is a type of skin cancer called malignant melanoma. And that's a more aggressive type of skin cancer, and that is more serious. These are moles, they're small areas on your skin. The key characteristics is they change quickly. They tend to have irregular outlines, not regular outlines. They tend to have different areas of different colour. And so it's very different from those moles that you've had all your life that are very round and very consistent. And it is an important message to individuals, particularly with white skin. They're at higher risk, and it's directly related to sun exposure. And if you do have an abnormal mole which is changing, has an irregular outline, is growing, and has different skin colours, that's something that you should be aware of. This type of cancer is particularly in those individuals who have had repeated sun exposure. There seems to be data linking it with sunburn, which is why we're encouraged to use sun cream. And it is really important that if you do have one of these moles which is changing and is worrying you, that you do see your GP, because actually it's a very curable cancer at its early stages. Removing the mole can be completely successful.
Okay.
And actually the survival for that's really good.
Well, that's good to hear, because, you know, it is highly treatable, as you say, but if left, it can be deadly. And I know that a friend of mine, a young mum, lost her life with it last year, with similar colouring, it must be said, to the Duchess of York. Will her colouring, the red hair, the freckles, the fact that we've seen her during her lifetime spending lots of time in the sun, have been a factor then for her, do you think?
Those are the risk factors. So the answer to that question, I think, will be yes. Now, there'll always be a genetic component to the development of cancer, but we know it's quite strongly linked with these other factors.
Professor, got to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed. And we're glad to hear that diagnosis looks promising here, that cure looks good for her. We hope that is the case. The weather situation, you've been keeping us posted on that. Storm Isha, battering the whole country overnight. Let's get the latest forecast now from Ellie Glazer.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Ellie Glazer. Storm Isha brought some very wet and windy weather across the UK last night, but it will gradually be moving away. However, it will still leave a very windy day through Monday. Plenty of blustery showers pushing in from the west, these likely to be heaviest across Northern Ireland and into parts of Scotland. And for Scotland, we could even see some wintry showers across the high ground. The best of the sunshine across the south and the east through Monday afternoon, and temperatures here we could reach 10 or 11 degrees. But with some strong northwesterly winds, that will take the edge off the temperatures for all of us. Through the rest of Monday, those showers continue to push in from the west, turning particularly heavy across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. But they will gradually start to ease from the southwest, so turning a little bit drier here through later on Monday and into the early hours of Tuesday morning. So there will be some clear spells and a bit of a drier start to Tuesday itself. A chillier night compared to Sunday night, temperatures widely dropping in the low to mid-single figures, perhaps a little milder across the very far southwest, but we could even see a touch of frost across parts of Scotland. Those drier conditions to start on Tuesday don't last long, as this next system pushes in from the west through the day on Tuesday, bringing some particularly heavy rain to Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland, into northwest England and Wales as well, which could lead to some further flooding after we've already seen that rain from Storm Isha. Strong winds will also accompany this, as well as those mild temperatures, so temperatures generally remaining above average for the time of year.
Right, OK, keep us posted. Still to come, 100 years since the election of the first Labour government. We're taking a look at the history of the party since then.
You're tuned into Breakfast on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you,
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you. Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months. That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello there. We hope you survived the storm last night. Pretty scary. Some of you saying, what storm? Lucky for you, if that is the case. There's about 15% of the country which hasn't really been too badly affected by it, but really it has been quite stern everywhere else.
Ferocious is the word I think people using this morning. 6:24, you're tuned into Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
Right, 100 years ago today, the first Labour government was formed. In what marked political history, Ramsay MacDonald took up the post of Prime Minister. The date, January 22nd, 1924.
Well, our political correspondent Olivia Utley has been taking a look back over the last 100 years.
I appeal to you to give us, during this transition time, a government that will be a union of all parties.
It's been 100 years since the country heeded Ramsay MacDonald's plea and elected the first ever Labour government. The party was founded in 1900, having grown out of the trade union movement and socialist parties of the 19th century. But it wasn't until 24 years later that they garnered public approval and gained power. And spells in the cold soon became commonplace for Labour. After MacDonald's government fell in 1935, Labour was out on its ear until Winston Churchill formed the wartime coalition, making Clement Attlee the first Deputy Prime Minister. Much to the surprise of Churchill and his allies, Attlee then won a landslide in 1945 on a manifesto that sounds very like something we might hear from a Labour politician today.
The crucial question of this election, on which every elector must make up his or her mind, is this: what kind of society do you want?
Attlee's legacy lives on in the form of the National Health Service, which he managed to create despite World War II leaving Britain virtually bankrupt. After two short spells in government in the 1960s and 70s, under James Callaghan and Harold Wilson, Labour came back with a bang in 1997 with the first Blair landslide. Tony Blair brought the party closer to the political centre and abolished its commitment to mass nationalisation of industry. Blair also reversed his party's policy on unilateral nuclear disarmament, and the events of Black Wednesday allowed Labour to promise better economic management under the chancellorship of Gordon Brown. After 3 consecutive election wins and then a stint of falling popularity, Blair made way for Gordon Brown, who governed for just 3 years before losing to the Conservatives in the 2010 election. Labour has been out in the wilderness ever since and endured a spell of bitter division under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership between 2015 and 2019, with a number of MPs leaving the party for good. 5 years on from Corbyn's departure and the party is almost unrecognisable. Now Keir Starmer hopes to make history by overturning the Conservatives' 54-seat majority and securing a landslide Labour victory.
We are ready for a general election. I've had my whole team on a general election footing for some time now.
Could 2024, like 1924, be Labour's lucky year? Olivia Utley, GB News.
Let's get up to date with what's happening sports-wise now. Paul Coyte here with that. So you're Ollie McBurney, you play for Sheffield United, and the last kick of the game can rescue you a point.
But the amazing thing is that it wasn't actually the last kick of the game. 103 minutes that Sheffield United score. So West Ham 2-1 up against Sheffield United. Sheffield United still bottom. And so there's, in injury times, 2 red cards, 2 controversial penalty calls. And then the latest Premier League goal, 103 minutes. So he scores. Then West Ham down the other end. Jarrod Bowen gets pretty much rugby tackled. And I'm going to say that because you've got Chris Akabusi and Dawn Neeson, who are both huge West Ham fans, because, you know, they wouldn't want to go against them. So rugby tackled and then no penalty given, but 2-2. So a little heat still on David Moyes. There's a lot of West Ham fans, not big fans of David Moyes at the moment.
Is that right?
Yeah. There's a lot that want him to go. You know, he's done very well for them, but there's a lot that are a little unhappy with the way they're playing. Liverpool, though, beat Bournemouth 4-0, so they were, again,
easy for them.
Very easy. You go watch them.
I was reading yesterday about pressure on Moyes, that he doesn't use anybody from their academy. Nobody comes through. And that's the same for most Premier League managers. There's very, very few clubs. And I often look at this and think, what is the point of an academy? What is the point? They don't bring the players through.
Well, sometimes they do. I mean, if you look at Liverpool, I mean, they had a debutant who was 20 that played yesterday, and there are a lot of clubs that do use their academies. And if you've got an academy and you bring one player through, so they spend a fortune on these academies and all these players and all these young kids that come through, one player. So if you think of one player, if they sell one player for 20, 30 million, it pays for the lot. So it's always worth it. But it's always best to have faith in the young players coming through. There are a lot that actually do use them. But it's interesting what you say about David Moyes, because some managers actually think, you know, I'd rather have tried and tested. But you need to bring the young players through.
Yeah.
James Milner. Should we mention that?
So this is the appearances record. He just goes on and on and on.
Yeah. This is the other end of the scale altogether. So you've got James Milner, 75 years old now, and still playing professional football. 9th highest appearance in top flight. So he passes Stanley Matthews and Alan Ball if he plays for Brighton against Wolves today. Gareth Barry is on 653. Mick Mills, you remember Mick Mills?
Yeah.
Ipswich.
Tell me he's still playing.
He's still playing. 660. the big moustache has just got a bit grey now. Who do you think is the person that has played the most? It's not Ryan Giggs. So there is another one. If you think in football, who has played more at the top flight than anybody else? And we're looking at 848.
Oh, gosh, that is a lot. Dennis Irwin.
No. Think, what position would you get the longest time playing?
Goalkeeper.
Correct.
Right, so it's a goalkeeper. How many? 800?
848.
Dear God.
Yeah, 848.
Is it a veteran goalkeeper or a modern-day goalkeeper?
It's a modern... No, it's a veteran goalkeeper. Friend of ours who's been on here.
Big Pat.
No, it's not Big Pat. He's been on the show with us.
Oh, gosh, the teaser.
Schultz!
Oh,
it's Peter Shilton.
Wow.
848 games. Wow. So a long way to go to get to Peter Shilton. So 848.
I remember, being 8 years of age or whatever, watching Blue Peter one day, and they had a day in the life of the Leicester City goalkeeper, Peter Shilton.
Yeah.
And showing him training and whatever. And I always remember that film stayed with me about how dedicated he was.
Yeah.
And that was him, obviously, 16 or so at the time.
Yeah, that's right. And then went from Leicester and then went to Stoke and then Nottingham Forest. But look at this. This is a great stat. Every season, so thank you to the Times for this, because this is great. Every season since 1933 has featured a league appearance by either Stanley Matthews, John Hollins, Tony Adams or James Milner. So since 1933, there's always been one of those four that's been playing in the league.
Gosh.
That's not bad, is it?
That's very good.
Yeah.
That's very good.
There you go.
Tennis, OK. So this is the Australian Open.
Yeah, Australian Open. We've got, at the moment... We've got Cameron Norrie, who's playing at the moment against Alexander Zverev.
About time we had some good luck.
I know. He lost the first set, 7-5.
OK.
There you go. So there it is. But if there's a Brit playing tennis, you know it's never going to be over. 2-2 was last I saw in the second set. So early days on that. And did you see Novak Djokovic? Did you see the double bagel yesterday?
Yeah, weird.
You know about the double bagel and the triple bagel, which is to love, so they call it a double bagel. 6-love, first two sets against Adrian Marinaro. Now, I think we've got... Oh, this is the wrong clip. That is actually him the other day. But there is Novak Djokovic, played against Adrian Marinaro, and... He's like 20th seed, this Italian, but at 6-love, as soon as he actually did... There we go. Now, that is him just after he's won a game. And all the crowd are going crazy, and I kind of feel sorry for him. He's got... Look, there's the... actually, he's French, I beg your pardon, so there's French fans there. So there he is, everybody's cheering. This is just because he's won one game against Novak Djokovic. And you can see that slight embarrassment in his face and thinking, well, you know, what else can I do? But 6-love, 6-3 lost to him. So...
Tell you what, Rory did well in Dubai, the Dubai Open yesterday, and he wins by a shot.
Amazing comeback.
Amazing putt to finish with.
Yeah.
But dear God, have you seen the size of that trophy that they win?
Yeah, it's great.
No, it's the size of a human.
Is it really?
Absolutely. What do you do with that jug? I presume you don't bring it home.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so, unless you have a really, really big
And Rory's
shelf.
won it a number of times now.
Yeah, and he made this amazing comeback. He was like 10 shots off.
Yeah.
But there was a player in America yesterday who won a PGA event, the first amateur to win a PGA professional event in over 30 years. His name's Nick Dunlap, and he's 20 years old. So the winning prize, this is the American Express Open, £1.5 million. Can't take any of it home. Has to go to whoever came second. Because he's an amateur, can't take the cash. He can have the trophy, but he can't have the money because he's an amateur.
But what happens to the money then?
It goes to whoever came second, who is Christian Bezenhout from South Africa.
I would take the money and retire.
What? If what?
I would take the money. If I was Nick Dunlap, I would take the money and say, yeah, thanks, I'm not going to be a professional, thank you.
But he's not allowed to, that's the thing. If you're an amateur, you are not allowed to take the money unless you sign professional form. Just become a pro. Just become a professional. Just do it. I'm a professional. Yeah, and that's it. So he couldn't take it. So 1.5 million.
That must be sickening.
Oh, awful.
Ghastly.
He's a good golfer. He may have a good future, but even so, you don't want to lose that sort of money, do you?
OK, my friend, thank you very much indeed. See you again later on in the game.
Still to come, we're going to be looking at the front pages and the top stories across the papers this morning with Dawn Neeson and Chris Akabusi.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise
and who will fall?
Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
We're going to take a look at the newspaper front pages. First of all, here's the Daily Telegraph, leading with the BBC to face tougher scrutiny over bias. And we will be speaking to the Culture Secretary in around 5 minutes' time, Lucy Frazer, about that very issue.
The Daily Mirror leads with the England football captain, Harry Kane. He's urging young people to get help for mental health.
The Express says Sarah Ferguson's in good spirits after her shock new cancer diagnosis.
The Independent focuses on the NHS, which has left almost 500,000 children waiting for mental health treatment.
A surge in modern slavery in the social care sector since visa rules eased is the headline on the front of The Guardian.
And joining us to go through the newspapers this morning, we say hello, good morning to Don Neeson and Chris Akabusi. Very nice to see you.
Morning.
Lovely to see you. Chris, let's start with a terrible story about a surge in modern slavery. This is front page of The Guardian today.
Yeah, so I suspect that this has never really gone away in certain sectors like car wash sector, but this is actually in the adult social care sector. And what The Guardian is saying is that since the ministers released immigration rules to fill vacancies, and we know that through the pandemic a lot of things happened, a lot of people left the industry, that there's been a rise in modern slavery. There's a company called Unseen, which is a charity, and they've looked to the agencies that bring these people across from various countries, charging exorbitant fees, almost, 1,000% more than, like 11k for a 1.5k costs. And I was just thinking about this, what would help facilitate this? And I tried to put myself in the shoes of somebody who's coming across here, who's got the promise of a great job. You go into the land of gold and honey. You're leaving. You might be the breadwinner for a family back home. You get this opportunity. It doesn't quite turn out like you think it's going to be, but you're now here. You're stuffed in some sort of substandard accommodation, and you do need to send money home. So you send a little bit home. So you can see how easy it is to be trapped in a scenario not quite as it was sold to you. So The Guardian and the undercover agents have come up with this and seen that this is going on in the 21st century.
But how does it turn into slavery? I understand middlemen, I understand people acting as agents, taking a disproportionate cut of someone's earnings in this. And I've heard and I know how domestic slavery works, where people are kept captured in someone's home.
Yeah.
But how on earth does this turn into the term modern slavery?
Well, so if you put yourself in that shoe and you've just come across from a developing country and you've won the lottery ticket, you are the breadwinner. Once you're here, even though it doesn't add up to the advertising bill, it's very difficult to melt away, try and get another job. You don't know the systems, the processes, the procedures. You've got no other contacts. The person that's got you here has got you in a psychic prison. They're telling you that the coppers are after you. There's all sorts of ways of manipulating the mind so that person doesn't feel capable of leaving this golden ticket.
Awful, awful.
Dawn, I want to skip to a story we haven't covered yet this morning, but we will do later on in the programmes. On the front of the newspaper, we'll be speaking to the Shadow Environment Secretary, Steve Reed, about this, but he's speaking specifically about our waters and toxic sewage. What's on the front of the paper?
No, this is our, as you say, Shadow Environment Secretary, Steve Reed, has given an interview to the newspaper. And alleluia for this. I don't think there'll be a single person in this country that doesn't agree with this, that water bosses responsible for illegally dumping raw sewage should be in the dock themselves. So they can now, Labour are going to introduce a regulation that means the individual bosses of the water companies, who paid themselves 25 million in bonuses last year, by the way, are going to be held responsible for what happens, how much sewage is dumped illegally. At the moment, it's the water companies themselves that can be fined, and that fine is £250 million now. But that, for a lot of these companies, that's not a lot of money. Obviously, they're paying out the bonuses. And, that last year we had the highest level of illegal sewage discharges in history. I mean, we've literally got... you are allowed to dump a little bit after heavy rain, evidently. You get a special licence to do that, which is shocking. I don't think that should be allowed. No. But they've been doing it... Water companies have been doing it illegally and basically getting away with it. And it's the worst it's ever been. So fair play to Steve for coming up with this and saying that. And it's actually something from Labour that everyone's going... totally 100% agree with.
And yet, I'd love to think I could believe that this would happen.
Well, there is that.
There's one thing talking about it pre-election, there's another thing doing it post-election.
Yeah.
You know, in Nigeria, they say in elections, power to the people, but only on election day.
Yeah.
Once I'm in, see ya, and then it might be a harder thing to get through.
Couldn't agree more. I mean, it's a white noise of election promises at the moment, and it's a year to go. Oh, great. Wow.
We're going to hear from the Culture Secretary very shortly about bias within the BBC. It makes the front page headline in the Daily Telegraph. It says the BBC faces tougher scrutiny over bias. Chris, what do you make of this one?
Well, yeah, so I think we're trying to push water uphill here. It's an impossible task. You know, we've all got a particular bias. You come into this world, you find your community, and you have a bias. Now, I know that the BBC is paid for by taxpayers, licence fees, should I say, sorry, licence fees. But to try to stop a particular bias, I think it's very, very difficult. Labour's left-leaning. Oh, sorry, Labour's left-leaning.
You don't say.
Although no, it's right of centre. Labour's right of centre, exactly. Labour was where the general populace is right of centre. So you might say that the BBC is left-leaning, is quite liberal, and that is a culture to get inducted in. So, yes, I like the idea you're trying to curb it a little bit in some way, shape or form, but I think you're pushing water uphill. And it's not. I don't think it's the actual output they're talking about from the terrestrial TV. They're talking about online stuff.
It's online and social media, and they're going to get Ofcom to regulate it from here on in, which is the new thing apart from this. But, I mean, it's like, you know, the BBC has loads of charters and you sign contracts, etc., etc. But then some people who work for the BBC, Gary Lineker, I think he's called, can just get away with doing and saying whatever they want, whereas other people lose their jobs over it. So there's a bias, lots of bias going on at the BBC at the moment.
Yeah, OK, so, I mean, I take your point with Gary Lineker, the individual, but I think it's much more about the corporation and the people that are providing news on behalf of the corporation. And my perspective is it's very difficult to come out of that cultural bubble, and you need many, many voices. I mean, what sort of bias have we got here in GB News?
I love everybody.
We're not paid.
GB News is totally different from the BBC.
100%.
In its pay structure, and also...
And also, this programme is straight down the middle.
Yeah.
Governed by Ofcom rules, so there's no slant one way or the other on this programme. And something I'll be put into the Culture Secretary, Dawn, is bias is often perceived by the listener and the viewer as not conforming to their views. That doesn't make anything...
That's the key word, isn't it? Perceived. You're absolutely right, yeah.
That doesn't make it biased. It makes it in difference to what you think.
Exactly. There is it's what you perceive to be. Just because you might not agree with it doesn't mean that it's biased. But you know, there are clear instances of bias.
Let's put that to the Minister. We have got Lucy Frazer at Westminster this morning to talk to us. So, maybe she thinks she's just catching the bus.
She's caught in Isha.
We got it.
Oh, here we go. There's the Minister.
Fabulous.
Excellent. We had a funny picture of the BBC instead of you, Lucy Frazer, but lovely to see you there. We're trying to work out what you're trying to do with the BBC, or what is the problem with the BBC. How do you see that?
Well, look, the BBC is a really valued institution, but it's really important that it maintains the public's trust, particularly as it's paid for by the licence fee payer. And some audiences think the BBC is biased. Others are very, very frustrated with the complaints system. So what we've announced today is a mid-term review, which will be fundamental reforms to ensure that the BBC is more impartial, and also that those complaints are handled more independently and there's further scrutiny, so that audiences feel like their issues are being listened to.
One of the concerns that the audience seem to have is with one particular individual, and you'll know who I'm talking about, Gary Lineker, who we've ended up doing a number of ministerial interviews about, to be perfectly honest. Grant Shapps, for example, your colleague in the Cabinet, saying you should just stick to the day job. How much of a problem, in your view, is Gary Lineker when it comes to trust in the BBC?
Well, I should say, as Culture Secretary, it's really important to underline that the BBC is operationally and editorially independent, but you're obviously talking about the social media guidelines. You know, the BBC have got those social media guidelines, and what they say is that the impartiality of the BBC is really important, and I think it's really important that those who work for the BBC, and this is what the guidelines say, respect that impartiality, and that they don't undermine the reputation of the BBC. Obviously it's for the BBC and not for me to determine whether those guidelines have been crossed by any particular presenter, and it's something that I know audiences and I are monitoring very carefully.
But I'd love to know, Secretary of State, what exactly is causing offence to people, because we have to be very, very careful letting the public regulate what is broadcast, because what you get, which is the state of broadcasting in this country at the moment, is dull, bland, boring, increasingly boring broadcasting presented with people who have been dipped in disinfectant. And it's dull beyond belief. And it's not up to ministers or members of the public to dictate. Surely it's up to broadcasters to say, this is the way we see this is the way we're reporting it, now swallow it, or there's a knob, you can turn it elsewhere.
Well, what we're talking about today is the BBC, and the BBC has a particular position because it's paid for by the licence fee payer, it's paid for by the public. And therefore it has a particular duty. It's also governed by the charter that's set out by government, and this is a mid-term review in relation to that charter. Of course, as you say, you know, broadcasters aren't governed by the public, and they're certainly not governed by ministers. But the BBC is governed by Ofcom, and there are rules and regulations in relation to how it should perform and behave, and that's what we've been looking at.
The Gary Lineker issue, I mean, you talk about how the BBC is impartial and you don't have any say over what, you know, how they decide to proceed. You must have a view. I mean, clearly you can see that this is a presenter, a sports presenter, whose own tweets have now been talking about sports, specifically suggesting there should be a boycott on Israeli sporting events. How can that not be a conflict of interest and in some way undermine people's trust in the BBC? I'm not asking you to determine it, you won't get involved, but you must have a view.
Well, I must say the BBC is operationally independent in relation to this matter. As I said, the guidelines, social media guidelines set out that presenters, those who are employed by the BBC, should not bring the BBC into disrepute. What I would say in relation to my role on this, you know, I'm looking at this very carefully. I'm looking at whether the guidelines are sufficient. I'm looking at whether the BBC is enforcing those guidelines. But the right time for me to get involved is in a charter review, and that's what I would do, having looked at these issues very carefully and monitoring what the BBC are doing.
When you watch the BBC, do you see, as a viewer, as a listener, that it has a problem?
Well, as Culture Secretary, it's my job to look at the BBC from that perspective. But look, what I'm interested in is what audiences say. And what we know from statistics from Ofcom is that audiences are feeling like the BBC is not performing that role in relation to impartiality, and they are getting less impartial. So last year, 39% of complaints about the BBC were about impartiality, when the year before they were 19%. So trust in the impartiality of the BBC, unfortunately, is going down. It's really, really valuable institution. You know, we should hold the BBC in high regard, but it's got more to do, and that's what this report is all about.
And I presume, Secretary of State, when there are complaints about impartiality, they would mostly, by far and away, be about news broadcasting.
Yes, so a lot about, you're right, this is largely about news, but there are issues that are brought forward by audiences in relation to programming more broadly, but I think there is a particular issue that people raise in relation to news and impartiality. That's absolutely right.
Speaking of audiences, I have to ask you what sort of audience you think the Lords will be for the Rwanda bill this afternoon. Do you think it could be a defeat for the Prime Minister?
Look, the Lords should take note of the fact that this passed through the House of Commons with a big majority. Obviously, that is something that the House of Lords should take into account. It would be really disappointing if the Labour Lords in the House of Lords vote against this bill. This is something that really matters to the British people. We have got a plan to deal with immigration, those illegal crossings, and it will be really disappointing if other parties thwart that.
OK, Secretary of State, we'll leave it there. Lucy Frazer is the Culture Secretary. And could we just apologise to you for placing you in the noisiest possible spot in the whole of London this morning. So well battled you. Well done for holding your own there. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. So there we go. Very interesting, Dawn, to listen to that. I just sometimes I don't understand. People should be very careful what they wish for. Some of the things that irritate me in the BBC are like watching their environment correspondence and whatever, and they all think they've got to be wacky, and it's all very pro-climate change, and so many messages rammed down your throat about this sort of thing. But I don't think anybody can see the standard of presenter on television now becoming more bland and bland and bland and completely safe.
I think you're right. I think there is...
Not just on the BBC.
No, I think you're right. I think there is a place. I think GB News does it exceptionally well. You have character, you have opinion, but we are not funded by the licence fee. I think what was very interesting about what Lucy was saying is, you know, particularly, and you pointed it out as well, the news coverage on the BBC. The fact that, you know, the government prescribed Hamas as a terrorist organisation. The BBC refused to use that word.
Yeah, but there's a reason, though. There's a reason, Dawn, because the BBC is not just parochial. We've got the BBC World Service, and so they are also thinking about a wider audience, not just the.
But why are they thinking about a wider audience? I often look at that and think, why am I paying for news to go out in Saudi Arabia or China or whatever it happens to be? I don't really care. I care for the British Broadcasting Corporation broadcasting to the UK.
Well, traditionally, the BBC was also part of our propaganda back in the turn of the last century, where we were pumping information out to those areas so they think the way that we think or understand the way that we understand. Whether that's the case now or not, it's a different matter, but that's where it comes from originally. The BBC was used as a tool to get across where the sun didn't fall on so it didn't, you know, when we had our empire, basically.
Yeah.
So
10 seconds.
I think the other thing with the whole Lineker debate that Isabel was trying to get an answer from is the fact that I think, is the reputation is damaging the reputation of the BBC.
OK.
I think they have to do something about it one way or the other. Let us know your thoughts this morning. Lots more coming your way from 7 o'clock this morning, including all the latest on Storm Isha. We want to hear how it's affected you, causing plenty of havoc this morning, and, of course, rush hour still to come. So here is your all-important forecast this morning with Ellie Glazier as we say goodbye to Chris and Dawn. Thank you.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Ellie Glazier. Storm Isha brought some very wet and windy weather across the UK last night, but it will gradually be moving away. However, it will still leave a very windy day through Monday. Plenty of blustery showers pushing in from the west. These likely to be heaviest across Northern Ireland and into parts of Scotland. And for Scotland, we could even see some wintry showers across the high ground. The best of the sunshine across the south and the east through Monday afternoon, and temperatures here we could reach 10 or 11 degrees. But with some strong northwesterly winds, that will take the edge off the temperatures for all of us. Through the rest of Monday, those showers continue to push in from the west, turning particularly heavy across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. But they will gradually start to ease from the southwest, so turning a little bit drier here through later on Monday and into the early hours of Tuesday morning. So there will be some clear spells and a bit of a drier start to Tuesday itself. A chillier night compared to Sunday night, temperatures widely dropping in the low to mid-single figures, perhaps a little milder across the very far southwest, but we could even see a touch of frost across parts of Scotland. Those dry conditions to start on Tuesday don't last long as this next system pushes in from the west through the day on Tuesday, bringing some particularly heavy rain to Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland, into northwest England and Wales as well, which could lead to some further flooding after we've already seen that rain from Storm Isha. Strong winds will also accompany this, as well as those mild temperatures, so temperatures generally remaining above average for the time of year.
A brighter outlook with Box Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News.
Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's just about to turn 7 o'clock on Monday, the 22nd of January. I can't believe how far we are into January already. Time is flying, indeed. And you're tuned into Brexit, Eamonn and Isabel.
Leading the news this morning, storms. The country's waking up to travel chaos as storm Isha hits. Red and amber warning still in place, and tornadoes and danger to life winds. We'll be bringing you the latest throughout the morning.
And then there were two. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has dropped out of the Republican primary for president, clearing the way for Donald Trump to take the nomination, with Nikki Haley trailing behind in the polls.
Another health bombshell for the royal family. Sarah Ferguson reveals she's been diagnosed with skin cancer just months after her breast cancer diagnosis.
London Mayor Sadiq Khan has kicked off another Brexit debate, calling for young people to be free from the Brexit work and travel ban. Is it a good idea, or is Khan just unwinding Brexit? We'll be debating that shortly.
Got Paul, he's got your sport.
Liverpool score 4, go 5 points clear at the top of the Premier League. And in the Australian Open, at the moment, British number 1 Cameron Norrie playing Alexander Zverev of Germany. Lost the first set, has won the second set,
Paul.
all level in the third.
OK, there we go. We'll have the latest for that, on that for you throughout the programme, and you can join in. GBViews at gbnews.com. Tell us how the storm hit you.
Winds of up to 99 miles an hour have been battering the UK as Storm Isha has been sweeping across Britain. The Met Office has warned of danger to lives from flying debris, with many experiencing power cuts and flooding.
The Tornado and Storm Research Organisation has issued a tornado watch covering Northern Ireland, parts of Scotland and the Isle of Man.
Well, we're joined in the studio by the meteorologist Tamsin Green. Good morning to you, Tamsin. This has been going all night. I don't know about you, but I could hear that wind and I was worrying that tiles were being lifted all night long. But we're heading now into rush hour. Is the worst behind us or yet to come?
So there is still some travel disruption ongoing, be it by air, land, sea. There's still things going on. The winds are moderating. They're still remaining strong in the north, so northern parts of the UK, northern England, Scotland. Winds are still remaining strong there, but for most of us, it is easing through the course of the day. But it's not too much of a relief because we've got more windy weather on the way through Tuesday as well.
Gosh.
And it's coming in waves. It's not consistent. What way is it breaking up as the week progresses?
Well, so it's staying windy throughout Tuesday, wet and windy throughout Tuesday. Wednesday, brighter skies. Later through the day, the winds will be easing. And then we're going to be seeing a bit of a split. So generally, northern and western areas will be seeing more unsettled weather, showers, longer spells of rain, brisk winds still coming in. And then high pressure still tries to ridge in for southern areas. So for the bulk of us to the south and east, we'll be seeing drier and more settled conditions.
Tamsin, just explain to us the way this is broken up, because we have got people getting in touch with us today saying storm. What storm? Now, what's unusual about this is that it's affecting basically the whole of the country. There may be 15% or so relatively unaffected.
Well, I mean, the entirety of the UK was covered with a yellow wind warning, and the majority was covered with an amber wind warning. And I mean, we're not in the amber wind warning area for London, but still, I don't know about you, but I was up most of the night with those wind gusts. They were still around 50 miles an hour, so it's still really strong, even outside of the strongest area of wind. So it's still being widely disruptive across the entirety of the UK.
And a huge swing in temperature, something 17 degrees. Last week I was at -5 leaving the house at 3 in the morning. Today it was 12 degrees. So there are some benefits to this jet stream weather coming through. It's got rid of the Arctic blast.
Yes, absolutely. So we had that Arctic plunge, we had cold northerly winds driving in. Now we're in more of a westerly regime. So yeah, we've got milder air coming in from the Atlantic, and temperatures are getting well above average for the time of year in the coming days.
So Tamsin, for people who were cowering under the duvet last night and they're peeking out this morning at just after 7 o'clock to see what it's like, what will today be like?
So today, winds will be moderating. So they're still remaining strong across northern parts of the country. There is still travel disruption. We've seen 170,000 people across Ireland have lost power. There have been hundreds of flights cancelled. I think plenty of trains still cancelled as well through this morning. So there is still rush hour disruption through the morning. Winds will be moderating as the day goes on, though. But for most of us, they won't be dropping too much below even 30 miles an hour.
Yeah, some breaking news on that. If you're listening to us or watching us in Scotland, Network Rail have just announced that train services in Scotland will remain suspended until around midday after what they described as a wild night. And they say the railway has recovered quickly this morning following Storm Isha, with trees and debris cleared across routes in England and Wales and route-proving trains reporting lines clear. However, this will have been kept safe. We'll work tirelessly to get the railway back on its feet as quickly as we can.
Imagine being on a boat today or a ferry.
No, thank you.
Something. Absolutely no, thank you. And it's always, people talk about the worst weather to fly in. This has got to be. This is Tamsin. I don't like flying in the wind.
No, I'm with you on that one. And I've seen absolutely awful footage of planes coming down in the turbulence, and so many planes have had to get rerouted. Some flights have flown for 3 hours in the sky just to come back to the same place that they took off from. So there have been some issues with that.
A good day to stay at home, I would have thought. Tamsin, thank you very much indeed. Keep us posted as the morning goes on. Let us know your stories of the storm Isha, which I thought was Storm Isha, which is where we both live, but it's Storm Isha, not Isha. But anyway, it's pretty bad, whatever it is. To the US now, they're used to all sorts of turbulence. This time, political turbulence. The Florida Governor, Ron DeSantis, he's dropped out of the presidential race for the Republicans.
We can't ask our supporters to volunteer their time and donate their resources if we don't have a clear path to victory. Accordingly, I am today suspending my campaign.
Well, the Trump campaign responded with a statement saying it was time for Republicans to rally behind the former president to defeat Joe Biden. But
a little funny one for you here. This is not before Donald Trump was filmed reacting in typical Trump fashion.
He just said, will I be using the name Ron DeSanctimonious? I said, that name is officially retired.
Nikki Haley she's an also-ran, really. Anyway, she's his only significant rival left in the race now. Roger, Roger, how do I pronounce your surname? It's Gewolb, thank you. Where does that originate from?
It's German.
German. So Roger Gewolb is a former advisor to the Bank of England. He's a political commentator on US matters there. So where are we at? Are you sorry to see DeSantis go?
No, I think it was probably always in the cards. He has a good record, but I think he's not a great candidate. First of all, he waited far too long to announce, so he showed weakness and uncertainty. Then he joined Elon Musk and a billionaire on Twitter Spaces to announce his candidacy, which was total idiocy, because even if it had worked, it's a very small audience compared to what he could have done on any television network. And of course, as everybody knows, it all went haywire with sound interruptions and dropping out and people talking over each other. It was a disaster.
I mean, do you think you can blame him for this, or is it simply the fact that Donald Trump is just such a big character? I mean, I've heard him described as blocking out the sun in terms of all the other candidates. Nobody else stood a chance, really.
Absolutely. I mean, being with Trump is like moving alongside a giant aircraft carrier, full of activity, people able to flatten anything in its way. He's just amazing, and that's certainly part of it. But I think that DeSantis did himself in, as I say, waiting too long. No, he's not responsible for the technical errors, but he is for the choice of platform to use. And then a lot of people feel that he's robotic with people. He doesn't have a warm personality. And in America, it's all personality-based. That's really important.
Yeah. You, of course, rubbed shoulders with Donald Trump over Christmas. You socialised with him?
I went to his Christmas Eve dinner at Mar-a-Lago, and I spoke with him again. You know, we talked about the lead that he has, which is even greater now, about the primary. He is a force of nature. He's quite something, and...
He's not young, and people make the comparison, look how much fitter he is than Joe Biden. But just over the last couple of days, he got Nikki Haley's name muddled up. She claims he's got cognitive impairment. Is that just a political attack line, or has she got a point there?
I guess I've seen him enough times to say that's a political attack. I mean, he is as sharp as a 50-year-old. He plays golf every day. He's super fit. He's a big, tall guy, my height, very, very fit, with an energy that's incredible. So, no, I don't think you can start talking about Joe Biden-type questions around Donald Trump.
In this very unsettled, unsure, scary world in which we all live at the moment, how much would Americans, if at all, be looking at him as the sort of leader they want in the world to stand up against Russia, to stand up against China, to stand up against North Korea?
Well, many people who support him see him exactly as that. In fact, the support is so great. One lady that I know who was at the dinner, who used to be the head of international sales for the world's largest beverage, said to me, he's what gets me up in the morning and gets me through the day. She used to work for him when he was president after she left her large company. The gentleman sitting on my right, who I know fairly well, is an ex-British Army major and MP. And he was so moved, it was Christmas Eve, he turned to me, we were at the table next to Trump, so he just looked at Trump and said, "You see that? There is the savior of the Western world, and we're on our way to Mass, and like Jesus, he's so wrongly castigated by so many." That's how loyal and moved some of his supporters are.
Roger, how would the world be different if Trump, would it be different at all if Trump was, at this moment in time, President of the United States?
I think so very much. I mean, you know, my trip was to talk to Trump people and to Biden people, and I found the Biden people, Eamonn, rather ill at ease at times, because there's a lot of criticism of Joe going on, not just his physical condition, but there's all the Biden crime family, in inverted commas, stuff that's building and possible indictment. But what's new, when I was there a fortnight ago, is the criticism that if he hadn't been so jealous of Trump and stopped a number of good things that he did, like the Abraham Accords, we wouldn't have Gaza. They would have signed, geopolitics experts told me, within weeks. The stick would have been taken away from Iran and Hamas, and they couldn't have done October the 7th.
Russia's a problem, though. He wants to be pally with Vladimir Putin. Of course, the International Criminal Court, want him for war crimes. So what do you do about that if you're Donald Trump?
I think he's changing his view, because the geopolitical experts I'm referring to are people who advise Trump and some who advise Biden, and they're all pretty unanimous now that Putin is behind all of this. Putin wants Mother Russia restored to her former glory, and wants the quote-unquote satanic ways of the West eliminated. And that's why he's, in league with the mullahs in Iran and all of this, and he's pulling the strings, they feel.
But why, with all of these criticisms of Biden looming, why do I not hear names who are contesting Biden? Why do we not hear alternatives to Biden from the Democrats?
This is what I don't understand. We've got two. We have Marianne Williamson, I think it's Williamson, an author who is Oprah's spiritual guide. And Marianne wants to lead with $100 billion of reparations for slavery.
Right.
Now that, great idea, sure, wonderful. But if you're an American, do you actually want to forego your summer holiday because of something your great-great-great-grandparents probably weren't even involved in? It's a sort of a risky stance. And she's got a couple of other fairly kooky things. Dean Phillips is a very wealthy businessman who made big successes out of his family's liquor firm, but he's a congressman. How is he going to step in and run America?
Isabel and I sit here continually impressed by Anthony Blinken, aren't we?
Yeah, he's impressive, yeah.
When we see him going around the world, is he a contender?
Anthony Blinken's stepfather was my lawyer in Paris many years ago.
Right.
And I think he's spinning in his grave at what his stepson is doing. But I think, he's just Joe's mouthpiece, and they say Joe is Obama's mouthpiece. It's people.
So that'll be a no then.
Listen, we could talk to you all day. Absolutely fascinating. Next time you have a chat with Donald Trump, come and tell us what it consisted of. We'd love to hear.
You'll be the first.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed. The House of Lords today is set to hold a debate on a report by its International Agreements Committee relating to the government's Rwanda strategy.
Well, this comes as just last week, the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak survived a vote on the bill in the Commons, despite threats of a rebellion from some Conservative MPs.
And let's go to our political correspondent, Catherine Foster, to tell us more. Catherine, good morning to you.
Good morning, Eamonn and Isabel. Yes, the battle to get this bill through the Commons is over, but the battle to get it through the Lords is just beginning. Now, there's two things here. There's the bill that the government got through the Commons last week, which is now going to the Lords in the next couple of weeks, and they're going to try to amend it heavily over the coming weeks. And then there is the treaty. Now, the treaty was agreed between London and Kigali in December, basically making sure that everybody felt that this was a safe country and giving assurances on both sides. Now, the International Agreements Committee in the Lords has put forward a report recommending that all sorts of safeguards are guaranteed before the House of Lords votes to ratify this treaty. Now, they're going to be debating that this afternoon from after 3 o'clock. They're going to vote on it sometime after 6. Now, we know that the government doesn't have a majority in the House of Lords. Lords love to scrutinise things in great detail. There's a lot of lawyers there, and there's huge concern about potential breaches of international law. And I think worth noting too that the opposition isn't just coming from Labour or crossbench peers, but also from people like Eddie Lister. Now, he was Boris Johnson's former advisor, and also by a chap called David Howell, who's George Osborne's former father-in-law. So quite a lot of concern in the Lords. Of course, Rishi Sunak last week saying to the Lords, get this through, do not block what he defines as the will of the people with this Rwanda bill. But my goodness, a lot of hurdles ahead.
All eyes on the Lords later on. Catherine, thanks very much indeed.
A taxi driver in Shropshire has won his appeal to display the Union Jack, the Union flag, on the bonnet of his taxi. Now, let me tell you a story about this. We know that Basil Brockhurst, who we're going to talk about here, he's not allowed to display this. Spookily came in on Westway this morning, a taxi in front of me with 4 Union Jack cushions in the back.
Oh, really?
In the back window, a black cab,
funny.
right? So obviously it is a thing. And Basil served in the army in Northern Ireland and Iraq. He had been told by Shropshire Council to take this flag off his cab, stating it was against the council's licensing policy.
Well, our West Midlands reporter Jack Carson went to meet him and to hear his story.
For ex-serviceman Basil Brockhurst, the Union flag means more than it might do for most. It flies high on the roof of this proud Shropshire man's home, but his decision to put an image of the flag on his taxi caused a controversy he couldn't understand.
On the 17th of October, they sent me an email stating that I was in breach of advertising standards and I had to remove the Cross of St George and the Union Jack from my vehicle. Well, obviously, I was not happy. I was sort of quite perturbed. 30 years service, Queen country, Northern Ireland, Iraq, and then suddenly I'm told that I cannot display the Cross of St George or the Union Jack.
The ban on flags was stated in the Hackney Carriage and Private Hire Vehicles licensing policy agreed to by Shropshire Council in April 2023. Stating there cannot be an advertisement which depicts any political, racial, cultural, sexual or potentially offensive language, symbols, flags or emblems. Now, after help from his local MP Helen Morgan and the Deputy Leader at Shropshire Council Ian Nellins, a vote to revise the regulations to allow 1 Union flag per vehicle, no bigger than an A4 piece of paper, passed the Strategic Licensing Committee this month, but not without opposition from Green Party councillor Mike Isherwood.
It's needlessly divisive to introduce flags to taxis, especially if it's only privileging one nation's flag. So I find it unfair, discriminatory, and I'm surprised it would even be legal to do this. We should have a neutral policy on this, and that's best achieved with the current policy.
Basil, who served in the light infantry from 1975 to 1993, has wasted no time in making the most of the changed rules.
And this is the outcome of what I'm allowed now, because the council have overturned the ruling. And obviously, it's no bigger than an A4 piece of paper, but they didn't say what I could do to make it stand out. And as far as I know, I'm just advertising Basil's taxes. Now, I feel as though I'm still being penalised and I'm being told what I can and what I can't have on a private vehicle.
He's aiming to go one step further and display a poppy with his regimental cap badge. But Shropshire Council say he needs to provide permissions from the Poppy Appeal and the Ministry of Defence before they can be displayed on his car. The first battle for this proud Brit has been won, but Basil's fight to include his remembrance display on his taxi continues. Jack Carson, GB News, Market Drayton.
Basil fighting the good fight there.
Yes.
You know, that's all very personal to Basil. It can be very political to other people. I mean, for instance, if that taxi was in Belfast or Northern Ireland in general, not everybody would get into it. Because the Union Jack means something different in Northern Ireland than it does elsewhere. But that's what he's trying to do, and you can see why he's trying to do it.
And we have a huge number of taxi drivers who watch us. Every time I get in a taxi, they're all big GB News fans. Actually, a lot of them listening on the radio as they drive around.
Do they say to you, what's that Eamonn really like?
Yeah. They do.
They say he's a really good... I'd like to go for a pint with him.
I say he's my bestie.
He's my bestie.
I do. But yeah, so if you are driving a black cab this morning and you are listening to us, this is your morning shout-out. You're very welcome. Lovely to have you with us.
And it was funny me seeing that taxi today with four
what are the
cushions
chances?
in the back window.
Whereas in Northern Ireland, they might not have a flag on the taxi, they just have your face, don't they?
Well, it would be
driving around in Northern Ireland
I do
instead.
have a
Which, to be
taxi.
honest, if that was in this country, it would be quite offensive.
I'm being serious.
I know, and so am I.
There is a black taxi in Belfast.
Yeah, I know, yeah. Not the back of a bus.
No, with my face on it.
I know.
You can specifically request
I would
it for
do
your
that
tour.
if I was there. I've never been,
Do you know
but
there's
when
a
I
bus-
do finally get to Northern Ireland, I will only travel
There's
in the Eamonn mobile.
It was the Eamonn Get You Home bus for all the drunks at night.
That's brilliant.
It's a double-decker bus.
Oh, dear.
With my face on it.
So many puns, I don't know where to start.
There we go. Storm Isha has battered the country overnight. Ellie Glaser will now batter you with the forecast. Let's have a look.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Ellie Glaser. Storm Isha brought some very wet and windy weather across the UK last night, but it will gradually be moving away. However, it will still leave a very windy day through Monday. Plenty of blustery showers pushing in from the west, these likely to be heaviest across Northern Ireland and into parts of Scotland. And for Scotland, we could even see some wintry showers across the high ground. The best of the sunshine across the south and the east through Monday afternoon, and temperatures here we could reach 10 or 11 degrees. But with some strong northwesterly winds, that will take the edge off the temperatures for all of us. Through the rest of Monday, those showers continue to push in from the west, turning particularly heavy across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. But they will gradually start to ease from the southwest, so turning a little bit drier here through later on Monday and into the early hours of Tuesday morning. So there will be some clear spells and a bit of a drier start to Tuesday itself. A chillier night compared to Sunday night, temperatures widely dropping in the low to mid-single figures, perhaps a little milder across the very far southwest, but we could even see a touch of frost across parts of Scotland. Those drier conditions to start on Tuesday don't last long as this next system pushes in from the west through the day on Tuesday, bringing some particularly heavy rain to Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland, into northwest England and Wales as well, which could lead to some further flooding after we've already seen that rain from Storm Isha. Strong winds will also accompany this, as well as those mild temperatures, so temperatures generally remaining above average for the time of year.
Up next is Sadiq Khan planning a Brexit backdoor.
We'll be debating that next.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Okay, now get a load of this on this Monday morning. Sadiq Khan's the Mayor of London, and he's calling for young people to be able to move freely within and around the European Union.
He says he backs a youth mobility agreement, as he calls it, to lessen the apparent economic and cultural damage caused after the UK left the EU.
But is this a betrayal of Brexit? Or is Mr Khan right? Should we free young people from the Brexit work and travel ban? Well, let's talk about this now. Social commentator Anna McGovern and political commentator Matthew Stadlin are here to debate this one. Anna, first of all, what do you see wrong with this proposal?
For a start, I believe that he is paving the way back to Brexit. And I think that he's going to keep doing this until he gets the answer that he wants, essentially. I think with putting this policy forward, he's clearly trying to get the young people on his side, because if he advocates for policies, for initiatives that are in their interests, they're going to turn around and give him support when he will need it. So I think that this is all a huge ploy. Let's not forget as well that this is the man that reportedly wasted 123 million public cash, 10 million of which on a training course to determine the colour of Met officers' personalities. I don't think that this is a man to be trusted, and I think that this policy is ridiculous.
But you just said that this is a policy that is in the interests of the young. That's why they would vote for it. So you think being part of the EU is in the interests of the young?
Not in the way of changing the Brexit visa rules. No, absolutely not. I think that this is, as I said, a way of paving our way back into the EU, and we do not do that by changing the visa rules. The public voted for Brexit, and we have to respect that.
OK, well, Matthew, you've been biting your lip there, listening to what Anna's had to say. How would you like to respond?
So this isn't about going back into the EU, and Keir Starmer, who, of course, is the leader of the Labour Party, has been absolutely clear about this. We're not going back in the EU if and when Labour win the election. We're not rejoining the single market or anything like that, the customs union. But this is a brilliant idea. I cannot see what is not to like. Brexit really damaged the opportunities of a lot of young people. Young people, I'm sure, overwhelmingly voted against Brexit. This gives them a chance, a limited opportunity to go and explore European shores, build bridges culturally, get vital work experience on the European mainland. And it also would help bosses over here, British businesses, to find the workforce that they often desperately need. I think it is a win-win.
So, Anna, could you just explain why you would be opposed to this? What would be not in the interests of the young being part of the Erasmus scheme and other opportunities within Europe?
As I said, I don't believe that the way to do that is by changing the Brexit visa rules. You know, as I said, the public voted for Brexit. We have to respect that. There are other ways
London
that we
voted
can create
overwhelmingly in
opportunities
favour of remaining, didn't it? Which is obviously Sadiq Khan's constituency.
And I think if you'd actually look widely, I think many people would actually disagree. You know, immigration, for example, is one of the top issues for the British public. And I think that we're seeing more and more initiatives that are being proposed forward to actually have a reversal of that. I honestly don't buy it that he wants to stay stay out of the EU. I genuinely believe that this is a way to pave the way forward back into the EU's arms.
But surely you can see the business sense in this. Surely you can see the cultural sense in doing this. And we're only talking about, a licence that would last for 2 years, gaining that experience of the bigger, the wider world.
I think that there should be other ways to do that. That doesn't mean overturning, the Brexit agreement that we came to and changing those visa rules.
Can I just ask you, Matthew? I mean, you say that Keir Starmer has been absolutely clear that he has absolutely no plans to go back on Brexit. But all of the mood music, he wants this closer tie with the EU. We've got senior Labour politicians like Sadiq Khan and I think Hilary Benn as well, also pushing these kinds of policies, and he is known for flip-flopping. So people have reason to be concerned, don't they, if they are opposed to their rejoining?
Yeah, and there's no doubt that Keir Starmer has flip-flopped on one or two policies, as has Rishi Sunak, of course, the Prime Minister. But I don't have Keir Starmer's ear, but I think it is inconceivable that he is going to do anything that comes close in his first term to rerunning the trauma of that Brexit referendum. That doesn't mean we can't have closer ties to the European Union, and that's a good thing. We want to work with our European partners. As for this scheme, and it's obviously not in the gift of the Mayor of London, but I just can't see how we lose out in any way, because we need, over the coming decades, to work closely with European countries. This allows our young people, some of the best of our crop, to go out there, build relationships so that we can work better moving forward. We live in, as you were talking about earlier in the show, guys, in an immensely unstable world, and we have to have close ties with Europe to try and protect ourselves against the threats of the future.
Matthew Stadland, thank you very much indeed. Anna McGovern, thank you. Really appreciate you taking part in that this morning. And we're going to hit the break, and then we come back with headline makers, and we have got the Labour, what is
Shadow
it?
Environment Secretary,
the very
talking
man.
about water
He
companies
is
and
gonna be
sewage.
here.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox,
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The government, not the government round, the opposition right now, Labour would ban bonuses for water bosses who are turning Britain's waterways into, let's face it, open sewers.
They say bosses have
Trousered. That's a very...
Trousered.
When you were down at the market the other day, did you what did you trouser?
I'm glad they've got trousers. It'd be unfortunate if they didn't have it. But anyway, they've trousered some £25 million in bonuses and incentives since the last election, despite problems remaining unresolved.
Yeah. No laughing matter, all of this.
Yeah.
We're going to speak to the Shadow Environment Secretary, Steve Reid. I don't know why we're smiling. We're smiling over the word trousered here, Steve, but this really is shocking. It disgusts us every time we've got to talk about this. And I know you've got proposals, but what I'd say to you is, how can you actually implement anything? The conditions these guys were given, these franchises in the first place, I believe there's, for instance, a 25-year notice period. If you strip them of their licence, they get 25 years to get out of it.
Yeah, well, good morning, Eamonn. And you're right, this is such a serious issue, and all of your viewers will be aware, I'm sure, of the state of our rivers, our lakes, our seas, and the record levels of illegal pollution, sewage, that is being dumped in our waterways. Now, what has really shocked me is we had our team doing some research, and they found out that the water bosses responsible for that illegal behaviour since the general election in 2019 had paid themselves £25 million in bonuses and incentives. Now, you're meant to get a bonus when you're doing a good job, not when you're overseeing failure and illegal behaviour, and yet this is what's going on. Your question was how can we deal with that problem? Well, what we would do is we would amend the Water Industry Act to give the regulator, Ofwat, the power they need to ban water bosses paying themselves bonuses while they are responsible for severe and repeated levels of illegal sewage discharge into our waterways. The point of that is to focus them on cleaning up the waterways before they think of lining their pockets with the money that bill payers have to pay.
We interviewed Fergal Sharkey from Surfers Against Sewage in November last year, and he highlighted what we fail to understand, frankly, a fact about our Environment Secretary. I'm not sure if you're aware, but we're just going to play you a clip, first of all, of what he told us last year.
We have a new Secretary of State for the Environment as of last week, Steve Barclay, and here's an opportunity for Steve Barclay to step up to the plate and stop delivering. Now, I'm sure there's no real connection, but as it transpires, Steve Barclay is married to a senior executive of one of the larger water companies.
So, I mean, we've spoken to the Environment Secretary about that, and he says that it has passed all vetting and is absolutely fine. Can that be right? And can you give assurances that Labour don't have any similar conflict of interests amongst their spouses?
Well, you know, it's for Steve Barclay to account for the relationships that he's got. I'm just going by what they're doing. Labour's come up here with a very common sense proposal, frankly, to give the regulator the powers they need to ban the payment of multi-million-pound bonuses to water bosses who are overseeing this kind of failure. Now, we could wait until the next general election, whenever it comes later this year, and a Labour government will implement this. But if Steve Barclay wants to steal this policy from me and put it through the House of Commons, he will have my 100% support, because I'd much rather we dealt with this problem today than wait until a general election. But, Ferguson has done an amazing job highlighting this problem, but the longer we wait, the worse it gets. And we can't clean up our water until we first clean up the water industry, and I'd love to see Steve Barclay take Labour's policy, put it through the House of Commons, and you'll get cross-party support for that, I hope.
And this is not going to go away, Steve. I mean, you look at the storm Isha at the moment and the devastation that that's causing. Any increased flooding anywhere puts the whole waterway system under terrible, terrible pressure which it simply can't cope with.
Well, that's absolutely right. We've had several storms, haven't we, in recent months. I've been on your show to talk about some of them. But when I've visited people whose homes have been flooded, it's not just that everything they own has been ruined by water. There's usually a high amount of sewage in that as well, so they have to scrub all of that out of the very fabric of their homes. Frankly, our water industry is just out of control. The levels of sewage that we're seeing in our rivers, in our lakes, washing up on our beaches, it's unacceptable. Down in Kent, they've even got this phenomenon called sewage tomatoes, and that's where people have eaten tomatoes, the seeds go through the sewage system, they wash up on the beaches, and the tomato plants grow. That is just telling you how bad the system has got. We have to get government to clean this up, and that means focusing on the decisions the water bosses are taking.
But you see, I'm not sure, Steve, I believe it can be cleaned up. The franchise were awarded on such favourable, biased terms that there's no incentive for these water companies to do anything to invest in their whole system. Yes, they can do the basics and they can wipe their face with what's going on here, but can it really be cured?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of your viewers will share your despondency about this, Eamonn. So we're not just proposing to ban water bosses' bonuses. We want to put the water companies under very tough special measures to make sure that they clean up their act. That also includes personal criminal liability for water bosses who repeatedly are allowing severe levels of law breaking with these illegal discharges to continue without a plan of action to stop it. It means independent monitoring using new technology, what is coming out of every single outlet, independently monitored so the water companies don't mark their own homework, and then severe automatic fines for every illegal discharge. If you start to hit them in the pocket, they will focus on what it is they need to do to clean up the water industry. I want to take that action as quickly as we possibly can, but as I've said, if Steve Barclay, Conservative Environment Secretary, wants to nick this policy off me, he's welcome and we'll back him.
An open invitation.
Yeah,
an open invitation.
I just want to ask you very briefly, talking of stealing policy ideas, what do you make of London Mayor Sadiq Khan's youth mobility agreement? Lots of Conservative commentary this morning that this is the Labour mask slipping and another sign that you are very much directing yourself towards rejoining the EU.
No, absolutely. Keir Starmer's been clear that the Brexit debate is settled, but we have to make Brexit work. Now, for many young people used to benefit from the opportunity to go and work for a few years in Europe or study and then come back. We can be outside the European Union but still open up that opportunity to young people, and frankly, why shouldn't we? Get them the skills and the experience they need to do better in their lives, to do better in their work and their careers in the future. We've got a great big exciting continent on our doorstep. People should be allowed to go there and work for a bit while they're young, even if we're not in the European Union.
Really appreciate your time this morning and the invite there to the Environment Secretary Steve Barclay. Come and nick his water policy. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. The time, 7:45.
And we are looking at the papers this morning with the former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, and the Olympian Chris Akabusi. Welcome back to both.
We're not just looking at that, we're looking at my taxi.
Oh, okay.
Here is my taxi in Belfast. If you're in Belfast, you can hail a taxi. Just ask for Eamonn's taxi.
Look. Where you going?
Right. Doing a wee bit less work these days, and you know, at weekends I take the taxi. That's George. She owns the taxi.
Fabulous.
Yeah, there it is. There.
You don't need a Union Jack flag. You could have Eamonn's face.
Amazing.
That is brilliant.
I can't find a picture of the bus. There isn't.
Really?
You've got a bus as well.
Well,
oh my
we've got a picture of us on buses together on the side of buses. Yeah.
That's lovely.
Chris, we just look like the back end of a bus. So I wouldn't worry about it.
I remember one day turning up at my kids' school, collecting them from school, and there was this laughter coming all out of their school. I said, "What's this?" And Akabusi was there. He was there. You were there doing a road show, or whatever, for my kids at school.
Oh, okay,
And,
okay.
Yeah.
Poor young ones. Have they recovered?
They've recovered, yeah. That was great seeing you there.
No, fabulous, great day.
Right, what are we going to start with? Harry Kane, and he's talking about the mental health of young people. It makes front page on the Mirror today.
Yeah, exactly. A big front page splash. Harry Kane, Here For You project, and he's releasing a video, or going to be on a video that's going to go out on Thursday for all young people at school, just to say that asking for help is a strength and not a weakness, and that many people, you've got your family, your friends, and he's got his teammates who he leans on in times of need, but he said we all need to have somebody who can hear us when things are going challenging. You know, again, he says you step in the arena on your own, but you cannot do it alone. And so there are those moments in time when things go a little bit dark, reach out your hand. And he's joined up with 6 charities under this banner, Here For You project. Young Minds I've heard of, Bodyline I've heard of, Mind.
You see, I'm fascinated you talking about this. I mean, as a sportsman, an international sportsman, you're expected to break barriers, speed barriers, pain barriers, stamina barriers, all sorts of things. And I'm sure, my friend, knowing your upbringing and whatever, I'm guessing there was very little help for you when you were younger. Therefore, I'm interested to see that, to hear that you've got a lot of sympathy for what Harry Kane is talking about. A lot of people could say that kids are too mollycoddled, they're too wrapped in cotton wool today. Everything is a problem to them. They need to...
I hear you, Eamon. I think we live in a different time now. So, yeah, in our age group, grin and bear it, stiff upper lip, strap on your chin strap, keep on going. But now our youngsters are exposed to so much more. I had a small little village, people in the children's home and school. Now they're on social media. They're getting abuse. They are getting endorphin hits and, for likes. Don't get the like. They feel terrible. Before, when you were sent to Coventry, it was just a few guys in school. Now, social media, you're blanked. So there's a lot more pressure on young people. I've got a young daughter. She loves the digital art, really good at art. But some people are making fun of her, saying, "No, but you're now 13. You shouldn't be involved in the digital art." And it affects her sense of self because she's committed herself to that. Whereas when we were kids, it was just a few kids in the class and going, "Oh, what's that?" But you go off with your mates. So I do understand that there's a lot more pressure on younger people now because they're exposed to a wider panoply of criticism.
OK.
Yeah.
Fuel poverty. Dawn, nearly 500,000 households in Britain will experience fuel poverty over this winter. And this is... I always predicted Christmas was going to be a big problem for so many people. We were going to waste money, spend money in areas that we didn't have to, and it was going to catch people out. And it must be so awful.
Yeah, Eamon. I mean, the energy price cap, which limits the amount a supplier can charge per unit of energy, has been increased, which has led to the average household paying an extra £94 a year on energy bills, from £1,834 to £1,928. Now, a household is in fuel poverty when you're spending more than 10% of your income on actually heating. So the fact that the price cap has gone up will put a lot more people into this fuel poverty, and they will be struggling to pay the bills. I mean, 38% of people reported a worsening financial situation, over the past year. It is obviously, I mean, you don't need statistics to know that is happening. But the fact that the price cap has gone up in January at the worst time of year, and we've had a very cold snap. I know it's a bit sort of warmer now, but a very, very harsh cold snap. And people are really struggling, and they need help with this. And it's, the fact that the price cap has gone up now, why couldn't they have waited till the spring or the summer? And how much money are the energy companies making themselves?
Yeah. I just want to bring this into the debate because this is happening at the moment, but I'm just getting word that Cameron Norrie's match in the Australian Open has been interrupted by a protester throwing pieces of paper from the front row of the stands on the Margaret Court Arena. Not clear at this stage if it is just a Boyle, but of course they did do something similar, didn't they, during 2 matches at Wimbledon last summer. Apparently the flyers showed signs saying Free Palestine, so it looks like a slightly different protest there. But of course, that is our hope, the big hope, Cameron Norrie down in the Australian Open, and a shame to hear that.
It is, and it was like who was a politician that was interrupted, giving a speech at the Fabian Society over the weekend. Mine's gone blank as to which
David Lammy.
David Lammy, thank you. David Lammy. I mean, there were 5 protesters there. One got up and same subject. Obviously, no one likes what is happening in that area at the moment, but it's just like constantly interrupting things now. And with the David Lammy situation, that could have been dangerous.
Yeah.
Fuel poverty against net zero, that's something that we've got to weigh up. Nearly 500,000 will experience fuel poverty, and yet the battle goes on for net zero. Quick word, we've got a minute left, Chris, about airport security liquids.
Yeah, I mean, we've all stuck in those queues where you're getting out your iPad, your computer, your electronics, your washing liquid. Yeah. Well, they've got these new... They've got these new scanners coming online. However,
they haven't got enough of them.
Exactly. So at the moment, only London City, I think, is operable at this moment in time. London Luton says they'll make the June deadline, but the rest of them are wanting to push it back. So hopefully they'll get it on soon, because it will make things so much easier.
So that means you'll keep liquids in your bag, and it'll just
everything in your bag.
Scan.
The scanner will be able to have a better picture of what's going on.
And it goes up to 200 millilitres rather than 100 millilitres.
That's already the case in some airports on the continent.
Yes.
You can just travel through and it makes
just walk through, and I'm always surprised. It's like, oh wow, you don't want to take everything out.
Yeah.
Well, they charge you enough for dropping people off outside an airport.
Oh, that's ridiculous, isn't it?
It's ridiculous, but it happens everywhere, and they're all owned by Spanish operatives and things like that. So I don't think anybody British owns any British airports, but there you are. That's the situation with that. Guys, got to go. We're gonna see Don and Chris back again in about 45 minutes' time. We look forward to that. Now an update on your weather situation. Storm Isha, where's it going? What's next? Ellie Glaser will tell you.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Ellie Glaser. Storm Isha brought some very wet and windy weather across the UK last night, but it will gradually be moving away. However, it will still leave a very windy day through Monday. Plenty of blustery showers pushing in from the west, these likely to be heaviest across Northern Ireland and into parts of Scotland. And for Scotland, we could even see some wintry showers across the high ground. The best of the sunshine across the south and the east through Monday afternoon, and temperatures here we could reach 10 or 11 degrees. But with some strong northwesterly winds, that will take the edge off the temperatures for all of us. Through the rest of Monday, those showers continue to push in from the west, turning particularly heavy across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. But they will gradually start to ease from the southwest, so turning a little bit drier here through later on Monday and into the early hours of Tuesday morning. So there will be some clear spells and a bit of a drier start to Tuesday itself. A chillier night compared to Sunday night, temperatures widely dropping in the low to mid-single figures, perhaps a little milder across the very far southwest, but we could even see a touch of frost across parts of Scotland. Those dry conditions to start on Tuesday don't last long as this next system pushes in from the west through the day on Tuesday, bringing some particularly heavy rain to Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland, into northwest England and Wales as well, which could lead to some further flooding after we've already seen that rain from Storm Isha. Strong winds will also accompany this, as well as those mild temperatures, so temperatures generally remaining above average for the time of year.
That warm feeling inside from Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
And we'll be focusing on Storm Isha in just a moment for you with all the details and the aftermath as we look at the winds that have been wreaked across the country and the damage it's caused. Coming up next.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan, Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks, the admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
to find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, very good morning to you. It's just coming up to 8 o'clock on this Monday morning. It is the 22nd of January and you're tuned in to Breakfast here on GB News with Eamonn and Isabel.
Good morning to you. Here's what's leading the news this morning, and the country's waking up to travel chaos as Storm Isha hits. Red and amber weather alerts are still in place with warnings over tornadoes and danger to life winds. We'll be keeping you updated throughout the programme.
Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has dropped out of the Republican primary for president. That clears the way for Donald Trump to take the nomination, with Nikki Haley trailing behind in the polls.
Another health bombshell for the royal family as Sarah Ferguson, the Duchess of York, reveals she's been diagnosed with skin cancer just months after her breast cancer treatment.
The head of FIFA has divided football this weekend after saying teams whose supporters shout racist slurs should be forced to forfeit the game. So should racist abuse at football matches trigger a loss? We'll be debating that shortly.
And Paul Coyte's here with all of your sport. Paul.
Yes, Cameron Norrie, 2-1 down in the Australian Open, although that's not all he's had to contend with. Free Palestine protester throwing leaflets everywhere in the middle of the game, so they had to stop that when he was 4-1 down, but he came back and won that set, and then he's playing in the next one as well. Also in the sport, Sheffield United scored the latest goal ever in the Premier League, 103 minutes. And you know what I'm going to do today? I've got, seeing as Question of Sport is over with, our sporting birthdays. We're going to give it. We enjoy that, don't we?
Yeah.
We're going to do that again this morning.
Just make sure you give me some tips as you do normally.
I don't like that word forfeit. You know, why don't they just say what they mean? You're going to be docked the points. You're going to lose the game. You know, if there's racist slurs, you lose the game. Yep. They're proven against you. Yeah. Forfeit. Oh.
Is it the word you don't like?
That's what your man uses, the Infantino guy.
Yeah, you forfeit the game.
Say what you mean, spit it out, lose it. Yeah. Right. You can join any of our discussions. You can email gbviews@gbnews.com, or you can tweet at gbnews. Anything you want to add to that? No?
Not at the minute.
Okay, good. Not at the minute. Run the sting.
So winds of up to 99 miles per hour have battered the UK as Storm Isha has been sweeping across Britain, and the Met Office has been warning of danger to lives from flying debris, with many experiencing power cuts and flooding.
The Tornado and Storm Research Organisation has issued a tornado watch. It covers Northern Ireland, it covers parts of Scotland and the Isle of Man. GB News North West of England reporter Sophie Reaper and GB News Northern Ireland reporter Mr Dougie Beattie. Let's go to Dougie first of all. And Sophie's what?
We do have Sophie there. We do, we don't. Apparently she's having some weather issues.
Let's see who we have got. Then we'll talk to them. There we go.
Good morning.
Sophie, well done. She temporarily blew away somewhere, but we got her back again, which is good. OK, Sophie, so it's windy where you are.
You almost don't need to speak, Sophie. Your hair and the backdrop is telling the story for us.
Absolutely. I mean, it's certainly not ideal conditions here in Blackpool this morning to come for a stroll along the promenade. Absolutely horrendous conditions battering the flood defences here behind me. Incredibly high waves. The streets are completely empty, and I really can't blame people for that. Of course, overnight, you say there, speeds of 99 miles per hour here in Blackpool. It was probably around 50 or 60 even that it reached here, but it feels like a lot more, I can tell you that. Of course, we have now been downgraded by the Met Office to a yellow wind warning, but that still means that there is potential risk to life from flying debris. There's potential for power cuts, damage to properties. Places like Blackpool as well, coastal towns and cities around the UK are also being given additional warnings due to risk of life from the huge waves potentially throwing debris into the air. So anyone around the country today should be taking extreme caution, because the weather, as you say, you can see by my hair, is really quite horrific.
Yeah, no, your hair's fine. It's not horrific. Just lashing you to death by the looks of it there. Dougie, though, we see where Sophie is, and I was just looking at some footage on my Twitter account today of Egypts jumping into the sea in Galway, and you know, it's one thing putting your life in danger, but then endangering those who have to come and rescue. you just can't account for the stupidity of some people.
Definitely not. I mean, it would be madness to get into this. I mean, where I'm standing now in Port Stewart, it was winds of up to 80 miles an hour hit here last night. I mean, I was trying to do a piece to camera and I couldn't even stand here. I was up on the main roadway. The camera was getting covered in water. We were getting covered. And I found it nearly impossible to stand, never mind reporting what was going on. But yes, in the Republic of Ireland, there's about 235,000 premises without power. Northern Ireland now has about 50,000 without power. There's over 1,000 blockages on the roads. That's down mainly to trees coming down. And you could say because we've had such bad weather of late, and of course we had that really deep frost within the last couple of weeks, and what happens is that water that's lying in the ground, especially around the roots of the tree, it expands, and then when the wind comes, you know, that expanse has already been, and it takes the tree over root and all across the roads. We've had a ferry, God help them, on the Stena last night that was due to dock at 6:30. It didn't dock to the early hours of this morning. They had to hold it outside Belfast Lock. I can only imagine what those people were thinking on that. Flights right across Northern Ireland and indeed to Dublin. One of them was coming in from the Canary Islands and was rediverted to France, of all places. So, you know, it has been quite a night in Northern Ireland and across the whole of Ireland. But the main part of this storm hit Galway and Donegal, and as you know, McGilligan Point is just across from me here to my right-hand side, and that's where those really damaging winds came across. So as we wake up this morning in Northern Ireland, we are now only starting to see the damage, but please, people, do not be going into the sea. Don't be trying to do something completely crazy for TikTok or anything else, because as you say, Eamonn, they're not only putting their own lives in danger, they are putting the lives of those that come to rescue them in danger for very, very little. And of course, we do now have the strikes in Northern Ireland. Road service are on strikes, and the forestry commissions are in strikes in Northern Ireland. So cutting those trees up that have crossed the roads are a big deal.
It is a big deal.
Yeah.
It is a big deal. Sophie, just before we say goodbye to you, what way did you sleep last night? Isabel texted me and said she had a rough night with the noise and worrying about the wind noise outside. What was it like where you were?
It was fairly similar. Incredibly loud wind overnight. So I'm in a very similar situation to you. Not much sleep, I'm afraid.
Racing wind will keep you awake, don't you worry. Thank you both very much indeed for braving the weather. Stay safe.
See, I find it fascinating to see that Sophie is a couple of hundred miles south the darkness there, so it's brighter. It's brighter where she is in Blackpool, and then up at Port Stewart.
I thought the exact same thing.
Where Dougie is, it's much darker because it's further north. Right, we go to the United States now, and the Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, he is out of the 2024 presidential race to represent the Republican Party.
We can't ask our supporters to volunteer their time and donate their resources if we don't have a clear path to victory. Accordingly, I am today suspending my campaign.
So he's out, and the Trump campaign responded with a statement saying it was time for Republicans to rally behind the former president to defeat Joe Biden.
But this wasn't before Donald Trump was filmed reacting in typical Bravo fashion.
He just said, will I be using the name Ron DeSanctimonious? I said, that name is officially retired.
So there we go. His departure leaves the former UN ambassador Nikki Haley as Mr. Trump's only significant rival. Let's get the thoughts this morning of our reporter Ray Addison. Good morning to you, Ray. Look, the next primary is in New Hampshire, and Nikki Haley is polling neck and neck with Trump there. Could be problematic for Trump there, but beyond that, it really feels as though there's only really one player in this game for the Republican nomination.
Well, Trump's polling around about 50. Nikki Haley, depending on which poll you look at, is around about
39, although this week, or the previous week, her numbers have been falling slightly. This will be good news for Trump, predominantly because obviously Ron DeSantis has endorsed Donald Trump. He's asking his supporters to support Trump instead. However, it wasn't exactly a ringing endorsement. It was a kind of okay, I'm going to support whoever the strongest candidate is, and that's not really motivational for his supporters. Some of his supporters may go to Nikki Haley. However, most will go to Trump, though.
And so, do we think then that we are looking at a rematch? Biden versus Trump, and if so, what does this mean? Who's going to win in that contest?
Donald Trump. It's definitely going to be Donald Trump on the Republican ballot, unless something crazy happens. Obviously his legal challenges are the predominant issue for Donald Trump at the moment. Donald Trump is polling ahead of President Biden when you look at the two as a pair. I think it's something like 50 to Trump and something like 39 to Biden. Compared to Nikki Haley, if it was to be Biden versus Haley, she's struggling against Biden in that situation. So it's definitely going to be Trump. He's got a very good chance. However, it's going to be a long 11 months till election day, and there's a lot happening. All of these legal challenges could cause serious problems for him.
OK. Ray, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Ray. Cheers. The time now, 10 minutes past 8 o'clock.
Lots of you have been very good at getting in touch this morning. We were talking a little bit earlier on this morning about the BBC. We had the Culture Secretary, Lucy Frazer, on, and plenty of views have been coming in on that. Steve says, when I was at sea during the 70s and 80s in far-off places, the BBC World Service was vital for us to keep up to date with news, sport and current affairs. These days we have phones, internet, Google, etc. The BBC should just be for the UK.
I agree.
Possibly, yeah. Bruce says, I switched off a long time ago as they're not worth the licence fee. The only thing about that is that it is a good sort of British sort of emblem, isn't it, that people
Why am I paying for it?
Well, I think the World Service is funded differently, isn't it? It has adverts and things like that.
Not totally. It gets an input from central government, but it should be totally funded by central
I suppose people would say it's a bit of soft power. Andy says the British Bias Corporation, once the bastion and regarded as the standard bearer of news journalism, TV production and programme, is now a laughingstock, resented and losing viewers year on year. There we go. That was when Lucy Frazer this morning telling us they are beefing up the regulation to make sure that people's trust in the BBC can remain.
The House of Lords is set to hold a debate on a report by its International Agreements Committee relating to the Rwanda strategy.
Well, this comes as just last week the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak survived a vote on the bill in the Commons despite threats of a rebellion from some Conservative MPs.
Let's go to our political correspondent, Catherine Foster, who will tell us more. Catherine, good morning.
Good morning, Eamonn and Isabel. Yes, the battle to get this bill through the Commons is over, but the battle to get it through the Lords is only just beginning. There's two things fundamentally going on here. The first is the bill that will start its progress through the House of Lords in a week or two. It's expected that the Lords will try to amend it very heavily, and it will go back and forth between the Lords and the Commons for weeks and weeks and weeks. And then there's the separate issue of the treaty. Now, that was agreed with Rwanda in December, and it needs to be ratified by Parliament. Now, a parliamentary committee have come up with a whole series of recommendations. They want guarantees before they agree to ratify this, and they're debating it this afternoon in the House of Lords from about 3 o'clock onwards, with a vote expected sometime after 6. Now, what it will do is it will show the scale of the mountain that the government's going to have to climb to get this through the Lords, because we know that the government doesn't have a majority in the Lords. The Lords like to take the time, as they would argue is their job, to scrutinise legislation very carefully. And also, the opposition isn't just coming from people that would seem to be on the left. This call for guarantees has come also from people like Eddie Lister, who was Boris Johnson's former advisor, and also from David Howell, who is George Osborne's father-in-law. So let's see what happens. In the meantime, the 11 Conservative MPs who rebelled against the government last week are meeting the Chief Whip, Simon Hart, this morning. They'll probably be given a little bit of a talking to, I imagine. But Rishi Sunak, keen to stress to the Lords when he spoke last week that he expects them to put this through. They can't ultimately block it. Rishi Sunak talking about the will of the people that this bill goes through. But my goodness, we're still a long way off anybody ever getting on a plane to Rwanda.
Thank you, Catherine. Appreciate it. We'll leave it there with the time at 8:14. Sarah Ferguson's been diagnosed with skin cancer just months after being treated for breast cancer.
Yes, this diagnosis comes as she'd had several cancerous moles removed. A spokesperson for the Duchess of York has said she's undergoing further investigations to ensure that it's being caught in the early stages.
Well, let's now speak to our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, who's here. This is another tale of royal woe as regards health. We believe, though, it augurs well for Sarah Ferguson?
Yeah, fingers crossed. The doctors are looking at it to see if it's been caught early enough to treat. If you remember the last time you saw Sarah Ferguson in public, it was on that Sandringham walk on Christmas Day. We hadn't seen her take part in that walk with the rest of the royal family for around 3 decades. And according to the Telegraph this morning, it was just a few days after that walk that she was diagnosed with skin cancer, malignant melanoma. As you said, Isabel, it was as they were treating her for breast cancer that they decided to test a few of these moles. She's understood to have gone to a very exclusive medical clinic in Austria to seek recuperation and treatment, but she's now back home in Windsor at Royal Lodge, surrounded by family. Her spokesperson says she's in good spirits, but of course, understandably, this is distressing. She has a family history of skin cancer as well. Her father was diagnosed with skin cancer just a few months before he died. But as I said, it appears to have been caught early enough from what we've been told by her spokesperson, so we'll have to wait and see.
Cameron, 2024, a bit of an annus horribilis already, and here we are only on the 22nd of January. But, you know, they come like buses, don't they, these royal medical stories, and it's not good.
I know, and this time last week I was just saying, why is it that we haven't seen senior members of the royal family out and about doing engagements? And then, of course, on Wednesday, we find out the Princess of Wales has gone into hospital for abdominal surgery. She's out of action in hospital for the next week or so, followed by 3 months convalescing in Windsor. The Prince of Wales out of action because he wants to support his wife and children. And then, of course, the King at some point this week will be going into hospital himself for an enlarged prostate. But with the Duchess of York and the King, they have both chosen to disclose what they have wrong with them. And that could potentially have a big impact on the whole country, because people who perhaps wouldn't have checked their moles in the Duchess of York's case, or indeed checked symptoms of an enlarged prostate, now may well seek medical treatment. The NHS websites, when it comes to enlarged prostate, it's gone up 11 times the amount of views to that website, which equates to 1 every 5 seconds. So it could help a lot of people.
But, you know, with the loss of Harry and Meghan, they've gone off to the States. You've got Prince Andrew out of action for obvious reasons. And now we've got a lot of these senior royals convalescing. Do you think this makes the case for a slimmed-down monarchy a bit more flimsy? Do you think the King might be rethinking it?
Well, the Princess Royal certainly thinks so. You remember the interview she did on Canadian television around the time of the coronation. She said the idea of a slimmed-down monarchy made a bit more sense when there were a few more people around. We have lost many members of the royal family over the last few years for various different reasons, and people are going to have to start picking up the slack a bit. The only senior royal still in action at the moment is Queen Camilla, who perhaps will be out and about this week, but then we have less senior members of the royal family, the Princess Royal, the Duke and Duchess of Edinburgh, the Gloucesters, but then Princess Alexandra and the Duke of Kent, for example, they're both in their 80s and they're getting increasingly frail now.
What about Sarah Ferguson's daughters? Do they come into the rankings?
Well, they certainly have their own patronages and causes they support, but the problem with those two is that they're not officially working members of the royal family. They're privately funded. And unfortunately for them, their father is the Duke of York, who is, of course, disgraced. And unfortunately, the problem for the King and the courtiers around them is that that tag is always going to be with them, regardless of the great work they do. So it's a tricky situation for the King. Perhaps when Prince William comes to the throne and he's got his 2 cousins by his side, in the absence of his brother, we may well see them take up a bit more royal duties, but we'll have to wait and see.
And meanwhile, a worrying time, I suppose, with Sarah Ferguson. She's got that lovely red hair, so freckly, and I obviously remember growing up. I think one of my first ever books was the royal wedding between her and the Duke of York, and I was obsessed with her when I was little. But she loved the sun worshipper, and of course famously pictured toe sucking, wasn't she? Always sunbathing. But, you know, this is the bad...
In fairness to her, she wasn't toe sucking.
Oh, right, OK, right. Well,
he was toe
sucking. OK, I trust you to remember the specifics.
He had her toe in his mouth.
Right. OK, nevertheless, she was in the sun.
Yeah.
And my point being, she's got the bad skin cancer, so it is a worrying time.
Yeah, and according to the NHS website, the main cause, as you said, is ultraviolet lights, and she has been pictures a lot on sun lounges, and she's got red hair and freckles. Again, according to the NHS, that is a sign that you've increased your risk of developing this type of skin cancer.
I'm so glad you're in the studio today talking about things. I mean, imagine if you were... That lovely coiffured hair of yours, I mean, would be everywhere.
In the wind.
It would be all over the place. I need a lot of spray.
All over the place. Let's see where all over the place is. Ellie Glaser with your weather picture.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Ellie Glaser. Storm Isha brought some very wet and windy weather across the UK last night, but it will gradually be moving away. However, it will still leave a very windy day through Monday. Plenty of blustery showers pushing in from the west, these likely to be heaviest across Northern Ireland and into parts of Scotland. And for Scotland, we could even see some wintry showers across the high ground. The best of the sunshine across the south and the east through Monday afternoon, and temperatures here we could reach 10 or 11 degrees. But with some strong northwesterly winds, that will take the edge off the temperatures for all of us. Through the rest of Monday, those showers continue to push in from the west, turning particularly heavy across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. But they will gradually start to ease from the southwest, so turning a little bit drier here through later on Monday and into the early hours of Tuesday morning. So there will be some clear spells and a bit of a drier start to Tuesday itself. A chillier night compared to Sunday night, temperatures widely dropping in the low to mid-single figures, perhaps a little milder across the very far southwest, but we could even see a touch of frost across parts of Scotland. Those dry conditions to start on Tuesday don't last long as this next system pushes in from the west through the day on Tuesday, bringing some particularly heavy rain to Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland, into northwest England and Wales as well, which could lead to some further flooding after we've already seen that rain from Storm Isha. Strong winds will also accompany this, as well as those mild temperatures, so temperatures generally remaining above average for the time of year.
Thank you. Should racist abuse at football managers trigger losing the game, right? Or game forfeit, as FIFA are calling it. Your views welcome in that. We're debating it next.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
delicious?
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train. Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa!
Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on the Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. The Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
2024, a battleground year.
The year the nation decides.
As the parties gear up their campaigns for the next general election.
Who will be left standing when the British people make one of the biggest decisions of their lives?
Who will rise?
And who will fall? Let's find out together.
For every moment, the highs, the lows, the twists and turns.
We'll be with you for every step of this journey.
In 2024, GB News is Britain's election channel.
We're talking about football, we're talking about racism in football. You know, where is that going? When is that ever going to go away, if at all? The head of FIFA has divided fans this weekend after saying teams whose supporters shout racist slurs should be forced to forfeit the game. In other words, they have their points deducted, they lose.
But does that punish the teams? Should they encourage better behaviour during matches and pay the price if fans don't listen?
Or is cancelling an entire game ruin it for innocent supporters? Well, something has to be done. Former Detective Chief Inspector and Bolton Wanderers supporter Mike Neville and political commentator Femi Nylander join us now together with our sports correspondent Paul Coyte. Paul, what about what happened at the weekend? Just remind people what went on at the weekend.
A couple of things that happened. Sheffield Wednesday against Coventry, and it was that the thing is, we're going to get into this, but it's a few idiots that do this, whether they're monkey chants. This is what happened.
Things on the pitch.
Yeah, Casey Palmer was the Coventry midfielder that had to put up with this, and it's how we deal with it. As you say, do people? Is there the three-step plan? Is it best to then walk straight off the pitch? And then it happened in AC Milan as well. Mike Maignan, the AC Milan goalkeeper, faced it against Udinese in Italy.
OK.
So it just keeps rearing its ugly head.
So, Mike Neville, what do you think about this proposal? Do you think that this could be punishing the teams and indeed the players unfairly, or do you think it could actually encourage clubs to get a better grip of something that surely shouldn't be happening at all?
Well, surely it shouldn't be happening at all. It's a very wicked thing, and the people who do this should be punished. But we live in a country where we shouldn't have collective punishments. So the whole team has played well, and they've won a game, the manager's done well. They shouldn't be punished for that. The vast majority of fans shouldn't be punished for that. What we should be doing is dealing with those idiots who do this, these criminals who do this, and they should be targeted and found, and the club should be held.
I would say, Femi, that's a good way of targeting and finding them. And if their fellow supporters don't like it, then it's up to them to do something about it. What's your view on what's happening or what's being proposed?
I mean, it depends on the extent to which it's happening. At the end of the day, yes, if there's like 5 people in the middle of the pitch and one of them throws a banana on a field, then you can find those 5 people and eject them from the stadium. It's not really very difficult to do. However, if it becomes the case that it's more systematic, and you find that within a certain club it's happening more often, or you find that it is particularly widespread in a certain area, then something needs to be done. Obviously, Britain doesn't necessarily have the same level of this problem as an Italy, for example, or a few other European countries. But it is a problem, and I'm not adverse to players, especially in the I think the players who are subject to this abuse should definitely as well have a say. They should be able to say, "Look, cool, match stop until either these people are rejected or the game stops."
Mike, you are a former detective chief inspector. You're also a football fan yourself, and your team is.
Bolton Wanderers are a life of sadness, really, but that's who I support.
Yeah.
But Eamonn, one of the main points I would make is there's a lot of money in football. There's a lot of money in football, and it wouldn't stop. If they're saying they're going to forfeit points, it wouldn't stop unscrupulous people paying people to do stupid things at matches to get the other team banned or forfeited. That would be if you start going down this track, it will end up in wicked and unscrupulous people bribing people to do monkey chants or whatever else, who have nothing to do with football, but then get the other team's points taken away. That would be a real fear.
See, that would be awful, wouldn't it, Femi, if this actually made the problem worse and that actually it went, sort of commoditised, if that's the word, commodified? What's the word I'm looking for?
Sounds good anyway.
I mean, I think that's always a present risk. You can pay people on the other team to throw bottles in the field, and that will certainly put a halt to the match. If you think you're going to lose, you could pay idiots to streak down the field naked and protest or whatever. I think that it's a very, very, very hypothetical to say that if, and again, I'm not talking about necessarily, I'm saying that if a minority player finds that they're subject to some sort of racist abuse, they have the right to say, we're stopping the match until such a point as either the individuals involved are ejected, or if it's, as I say, if it's more than 5, 10, 20 people, if it's proper. And again, remember how big a football stadium is. So for a chant to be audible, for a racist chant to be audible, it's more than 20 people saying it. Because the size of the football stadium,
Femi, Paul and I were talking just before we came on air, and we're finding it hard to think of other sports,
of course,
which have got a racist slant to them, a racist abuse.
If you look at sports in general and look at crowds at sports, and the most passionate sport as far as crowd is concerned is going to be football. See, England have faced it in Budapest, and this is when, and everybody's right by making the point of, where do you draw the line? Can you ban a team, or can you forfeit a game when there's like 2 or 3? Do you then look, if there's 1,000, do you then forfeit the game then? And this is where you have to try and draw the line. Is it fair on the team? Is it fair on the other supporters? It's absolutely got to be stamped out. There's no question about that, because it's abhorrent what's going on. But then again, who suffers, and is at what cost? Is it best thing to do?
So, Mike, you don't believe in collective punishment. How do you think this can be resolved? What do you think of the FIFA pronouncement that the team should forfeit the points?
I'm absolutely against any form of group punishment like that. What should happen is that the clubs should be more strict about observing the crowd, and if people are banned, they should be more strict about enforcing those bans, which they're not doing at the moment. That would be the key thing for me. You've got to punish individuals. We live in a democracy. We should be punishing the individuals who commit crime, not these group things. Clubs, of course, can be fined money if there's lots of racist or other activities, but we shouldn't be punishing hard-paying fans who come from poor backgrounds, whose entertainment is that 90 minutes.
Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you all very much indeed. Your views welcome. gbviews@gbnews.com. What else is happening in the world of sport, Paul? Tell us.
A few other bits and pieces. Cameron Norrie is playing in the Australian Open at the moment against Alexander Zverev from Germany, and it's gone like this. It's 1-0, 1-up to 1-love to Zverev. Norrie's come back. Zverev's gone 2-1, so it's now 2-2 in sets. Final set, and that's going on in Melbourne at the moment.
Has this protest Isabel was highlighting had any effect on the game at all?
I don't think it has, to be honest with you. It was a protest. There's a woman there that was throwing pro-Palestinian leaflets across the crowd. There she is there. It was at 4-1. They stopped the game briefly and then carried on. So whether it's actually had any effect, I mean, obviously it's going to affect both players. No one's going to be affected more than the other one. But then the game's carried on. So I think she was removed and then everything continued. But that's happened in the middle of that.
Okay. Right, football over the weekend?
Yep, a little bit of that. Sheffield United scored the latest ever Premier League goal. And I said earlier, you're trying to latest as in latest in the game.
103
103 minutes, because you love that, don't you, when games go on extra?
Yeah.
103 minutes, Sheffield United scored their penalty, so it's 2-2 against West Ham. Liverpool score 4, so they're 5 points clear now at the top of the Premier League. And there's also a golf, I want to mention golf as well. And this is, well, Rory McIlroy. I know you mentioned Rory earlier, who played in Dubai and played brilliantly. But we've got a young player, 20-year-old American golfer by the name of Nick Dunlap. Now, Nick played in the PGA, which is the American Tour. There's Nick there. First amateur to win a PGA event in over 30 years. It's the American Express title in California. So it's a $1.5 million winner's check. But being an amateur, he doesn't get
That's
penny.
awful story.
It's not allowed it. It's not allowed it. He's an amateur.
Rory McIlroy won 1.1 million in Dubai at the Dubai Open yesterday.
That's peanuts for Rory.
But the worst thing was he got this trophy, which is the size of his body. It's massive.
It is.
Jug. It's the biggest jug I've ever seen.
It is, yeah. He actually can travel home in the trophy, and then he can actually ride back on that.
Yes,
do you want to do a couple of birthdays? Let's do a couple of birthdays. Izzy, I've not helped you at all with this one. First one, I've got a couple for you. Let's go with one of our greatest boxers of all time, going back to the 90s. There he is on the left, the Dark Destroyer, Nigel Benn. How old do you think Nigel Benn is today? There he is, taking a punch there.
As me.
61.
61 for Nigel?
60.
60 is the correct answer.
It's the big
60.
6-0.
Do you want to double down on this?
Yeah.
Do you want to go with another one?
Right.
This is not sporty, but it's one that you'll remember that maybe Izzy won't. Who's that man?
Oh, that man.
Oh, look at the neckerchief. So you know you're looking fashion of the early 70s.
I've no idea. Even though somebody's just told me his name in my ear, I've still no idea who he is.
The Galloping Gourmet. You remember the Galloping Gourmet?
No, never watched it. I knew what it was. Used to be on. Used to just switch the channel when it came on.
Did you?
Oh
dear. Galloping Gourmet. Graham Kerr was the first TV celebrity chef worldwide, and what he would do, he'd grab someone out of the audience, sit them down, cook them dinner, and then he'd take the first bite and close his eyes, look into the camera.
Looks brilliant.
So the Galloping Gourmet, who you have no care for or care for,
you'd gallop with him.
I'd gallop with
you.
Graham,
Of course you would. So
yeah.
think early 70s, and he's still alive today. How old?
Early
He's knocking
70s.
on a bit.
OK, 84.
84. He's from New Zealand. Made a fortune around the world in the States
85.
over here. Yeah, you don't want to. You don't know. 90.
Oh,
the Galloping
wow.
Gourmet, still
Not galloping
cooking.
so much, just a gentle rise and
He's the Hobbling Gourmet. Now he's 90 years old. So there we are.
Brilliant.
Gosh, the things. Do you not think there are too many cooking programmes?
No, of course there are.
Never enough.
Yeah, there are now. But there was him and Fanny Craddock in the day. That was
You
it.
know what I can't stand? Saturday morning
Look
TV.
what you've started now.
It used to be
I
Noel
love it.
Edmonds' Swap
I love
Shop
the
and whatever.
cooking. I
Tis
love
was.
the cooking.
Now you got until this.
Yeah, now all you get is so-and-so cooking, somebody else cooking on the other side.
Every time they do something, I want to cook it.
Oh, turn it off.
Scallop on one side,
Trouble is, I don't
2
get a chance
minutes
to
on the
watch
other
it.
side. Bring the swaps back, you know?
The worst thing about cooking is dishes.
Yeah.
Just cleaning up.
Dishwasher. Just rack and stack.
That's the only part of cooking I ever get involved in, is the washing up.
Is it?
Yeah,
God,
can't
you
do it.
two.
I'd love to try.
To be fair,
but
I'm
just,
pretty much the same.
yeah.
Had a full roast dinner last night, cooked by my hubby.
Cooked by him?
Well, I peeled the potatoes and boiled the potatoes, but he cares about the meat more than me, so it's like
Oh, really?
a work of
That's a
art,
good
you know,
combo.
getting into the lamb.
I just want to eat
I'm
it.
just banned from the kitchen. I'm not allowed to go.
Well,
you're
yeah,
not
I can
really? Oh,
understand
that's
that.
okay.
Yeah, the mess you make.
But you go to YouTube, Galloping Gourmet,
Okay.
Graham Kerr.
Yeah.
Give it a go. Revolutionised.
But you know, he's something that I think you should have as a cravat.
Well, a neckerchief, yeah.
Yes, I think you cravat, because you've got this, you know, where your neck is
Stop
just
it.
not what it used to be.
Yes.
It should be. And you
Well,
could
they
have
just
a
cover over.
cravat, yeah.
Well, you know what? Years ago, I'd say about 10 years ago, or maybe even longer, Robert Palmer came into a radio show I was doing. And Robert Palmer, the singer...
Addicted to Love?
Yeah, that's him. Yeah. And he was with the Power Station at the time.
Was he?
Came in, and he had a blue jumper and a red neckerchief. And I thought, God, that looks fantastic. If I wore it, it would look absolutely ridiculous. I had a J-cloth around my neck.
It might look very camp.
I think it would look slightly camp.
Have you ever worn one, Eamonn?
No.
My dad was partial to one, but
To
my
a neckerchief or a
father-in-law
cravat?
suspected that he might be a bit camp, but that, you know, clearly wasn't. But, you know, that was an interesting...
Well, look, I will wear one for the sport tomorrow, but please just don't make any comment about what I saw.
OK, good. Yeah, good to use the one there.
At a jaunty angle.
Right, we digress. We've got to crack on. Lovely to see you, as always, Paul. Thank you very much. Stay with us. We're talking about another TV legend, this time one who's wrestled a 48-stone gorilla. Sorry. Just, anyway, that's coming up after this.
I'm Christopher Hope.
And I'm Gloria Di Piero, bringing you
PMQ's Live here on GB News. Every Wednesday, we'll bring you live coverage of Prime Minister's questions when Rishi Sunak and Sir Keir Starmer go head-to-head in the House of Commons.
We'll be asking our viewers and listeners to submit the questions that they would like to put to the Prime Minister, and we'll put that to our panel of top politicians in our Westminster studio.
That's PMQ's Live here on GB News, Britain's election channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
The things we've been talking about during the break. I hope your last few minutes have been as interesting as mine. Going through what's making the news this morning, former editor of the Daily Star, Dawn Neeson, and all-round Olympian superstar Chris Akabusi. Very good to see you both.
Thank you.
For their last outing this morning. Chris, right, in the Times, more than 300 schools have been told to stop calling pupils boys and girls.
Yeah, this is absolutely amazing. Yeah, so 300 schools. Don't say boys and girls. You've got to say they or them or he or she. You mustn't assume. Stonewall charged £99 per annum to be on their school's champions programme. When I was a kid, champions had to do something to do with sports, but now it's about this.
Okay. Right, let me say something. if that implies that in any way referencing the sex of a child is in some way a weakness and creates confusion, I would say by not calling them by their sex, that's the bit that creates confusion. So, Dawn, what is wrong with, categorising youngsters?
It's insane, isn't it? I really wouldn't want to be teaching English or human biology at school at the moment, because how do you explain plural, they, them? We was talking to the lovely makeup artist during the break, and her little boy, her child goes to a nursery, and they are banned from using the word 9-month-old babies, banned from using he and she, and that's say they and them. It's a 9-month-old baby.
Yeah.
How can you misgender a 9-month-old baby?
What happens to you if you ignore this or don't listen?
This is the thing, that the woman that's being trained to do this, the childminder, gets in trouble if she doesn't use they or them to describe a baby. And let's face it, we've got a little boy baby and you're changing its nappy and it pees, it's a little boy, come on.
0.02 or 0.2% of the population, according to the last census,
just insane.
Term themselves transgender. The vast majority, as you say, of these kids have never even thought about these things. And as you say, Eamonn, just creates more confusion for children in a very confusing and strange world anyway.
Well, you also see that it's indoctrination, getting them when they're very, very young, so they've got no choice but to be enforced in this new way of language.
Scary.
It's very, very strange.
Well, you're a parent of young children. Where would you stand if you knew your kids were not being referred to as either boy or girl?
I'd be furious, absolutely furious.
Would you feel powerless? Would you feel there's anything you could do about it?
I would definitely have a conversation with the school about it, but I do think, a lot of parents aren't aware of what's going on behind the school gates, and that is a problem. Quite often, schools are, you pick your child up from the gate. You don't go in. The amount you know about what goes on in the classroom is really limited, and kids don't always necessarily talk about what goes on at school. So it can take a long time before you know what's going on.
Do you know the worst possible question in the whole world is this, from your parents? Well,
how
was
your day?
What did you do at school today? You just think, go away. It's like when I come back from work and somebody says to me, well, what was work like today?
Oh, I'm worse than that. I said, what did you learn? Tell me something interesting that you learnt today.
What, to your husband?
Well, yeah, to everyone, and I get nothing back. But, fair enough. Right.
Let's talk about health.
Yes.
Heart care crisis. Dawn, the NHS is suffering its worst heart care crisis in living memory.
I don't want to depress people on a Monday morning, but this is actually scary news. Early deaths from heart disease have hit their highest level in more than a decade. Cases of heart attacks, heart failure and strokes among the under 75 had been tumbling thanks to us all quitting smoking and advanced surgical techniques, etc.
And lack of strikes.
But now, obesity, diabetes and undiagnosed blood pressure are pushing it back. We're pushing healthcare back. More and more people.
Which all comes back to weight and eating badly.
Oh, you know what, Eamonn? I mean, I was sort of like writing a piece during the week for last week on obesity, and obesity in Japan is at 4% because they're not frightened of using the fat word, whereas in this country it's 25%, and we have little kids who are now obese because we're so terrified of actually talking about it in honest language. I mean, I know there are all sorts of reasons for people to be overweight and obese, but it's like you feel nervous about talking in case you upset someone. You're fat shaming.
Yeah.
Japan, it's 4%. They're doing something right.
Raw fish. And portions. And I don't think they don't sell all the junk in the way that we do, and therefore the temptations aren't there. They just kind of I don't know,
You
just
know what,
moderate
Isabel,
their behaviour better than we do.
In Japan, if you go to work, your company has a right to measure your waist to make sure that you are actually not becoming
well,
overweight.
that's you out of it. That's the end of that.
Right. And you have to do some physical exercise first thing every morning.
Well, that's fine. Yeah, that'd be great. I'd like a little workout during the break. Sometimes Eamonn and I do that. People don't realise, but we get to do a bit of we exercise our calves.
We stretch in here during the breaks. But you're right. I would like a bit of that old.
Yeah, me too. See it in the park.
A bit of something like that. A bit of movement there with that. But you're saying that we should just stop being so sensitive about our dimensions.
Well, I think there's lots of issues going on with this story, and obviously we've had the pandemic, and you know the National Health Service does need a bit of a sort out. I think we'll all admit to that. So there's lots going on here, but I do think we have a problem with being honest about obesity in this country.
Says the skinny girl.
Yeah, when you said that, though,
not skinny.
Well, I think you're right. So when you start talking about the pandemic and our response to the pandemic, no names, no patriots, but I think that we need to look a little bit further about these early deaths and don't just blame it on obesity. A lot has happened in the last few years, and you know there's long COVID. We don't know also about the MNR, the vaccine. So you know it says early deaths, and I know that Andrew Bigden talks a lot about this. So I think a lot of investigation is going to this, and don't make assumptions at the first point of call here.
Yeah, although we should stress, I suppose, that a lot of the discussions around vaccines has had a knock-on with trust in vaccines, and we've got this huge problem with measles at the moment.
We absolutely
need to be careful.
No, 100%. No, 100% with you. 100% with you.
Can we talk about Brian Blessed?
Yes. Oh, sorry. I know I've got a loud mouth, but there's somebody
of the start, Robin, our director, because I mean he's quite a character, isn't he? But there he is, and he's been talking this time about wrestling a 48-stone male gorilla. Why, Chris Akabuchi?
Yeah, the gorilla's called Gurgis. And Brian Blessed has purported to have wrestled Gurgis, and when 48 stone, and when he wrestled him, guess what? The ladies' gorillas come to his rescue, and apparently he says that they come to his rescue, and he's got to be very careful because, and I don't know if I can say this element, they play with his flies.
Oh.
And he has to go,
What you're saying is they find him irresistible.
Yeah, exactly. He's irresistible to the gorillas. But I love the little comment in The Sun because it says, they're sure that they heard him coming. So, yeah. I'll talk about his voice. So.
Gorillas have incisors. They have
naughty.
Massive chick.
Like fangs.
Set that up Oh, sorry. Oh, my goodness.
Having a hot flush now. Look at that.
So you were discussing this story, Isabel. You had researched this story earlier today.
No, I hadn't researched it. As soon as you said Brian Blessed, I remember, because this is the sort of story you don't forget, is that about 8 years ago, or longer than that, he famously described this crazy incident. It was a Radio 4 interview, I think, when he claims to have delivered a baby in Richmond Park with his bare hands and bitten through the umbilical cord and cleaned the blood off the baby's face with his tongue.
Licked the blood.
So I don't know if he might be a bit apocryphal in his stories or what there, but
I think if he'd seriously wrestled a gorilla, he wouldn't be
talking
about it, would it? No.
Exactly.
But one thing I can't deny, I'm sure the gorillas do find him.
Well, I'm just trying to imagine all those female gorillas trying to grab hold of him. I mean, just imagine they're trying to grab... And they go to the bloke, mine, give me your flies. Leave it.
You've said enough.
Imagine Akabuchi and Brian Blessed in the one room.
Oh, no. He wins. He's 87, you know.
Good grief.
He's 87.
Right. Tell us about, briefly, we've got a minute and a half left, Yorkshire puddings, Dawn. And I think Yorkshire puddings are all right. They're nice with gravy.
I love them.
In it. I mean, I wouldn't say I love them. I think they're perfectly acceptable.
I'm going to read this out in Sun style because it's a tabloid. How far would you drive for 6 inches? Is it?
Goodness sake.
I'm reading it out loud. Basically, this is a pub. It's in Turnford in Hertfordshire, and they have 6-inch wide Whoppers.
6 inch wide?
6 inch wide.
That's a Whopper.
Yorkshire puddings. And people people are so obsessed with these Yorkshire puddings, they drive for 6 hours to experience them.
I think, in conclusion, I wouldn't drive very far for 6 inches.
What was it called?
I know.
Definitely not.
They do.
Ooh, check you out.
They do them in York, and they have they're like sandwiches. They fill them up with all sorts of
We used to have them toad in a hole. That's what a great big.
Careful. You're going to have trouble already.
All right, well, that's lunch sorted out today.
Pull us back in.
Do that.
We lost control of this end of the...
Thank you, Don Neeson.
Oh, God.
Chris Sakabusi.
Pleasure.
Both very much. Maybe the last time.
Look how sober
Maybe the last time we see you all. But, it's been a pleasure. Thank you very much indeed. Let's get an update on your weather picture today. After Storm Isha, well, actually, our Storm Isha continues. Where will it be today? Ellie Glaser with the picture.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good morning, welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Ellie Glaser. Storm Isha brought some very wet and windy weather across the UK last night, but it will gradually be moving away. However, it will still leave a very windy day through Monday. Plenty of blustery showers pushing in from the west, these likely to be heaviest across Northern Ireland and into parts of Scotland. And for Scotland, we could even see some wintry showers across the high ground. The best of the sunshine across the south and the east through Monday afternoon, and temperatures here we could reach 10 or 11 degrees. But with some strong northwesterly winds, that will take the edge off the temperatures for all of us. Through the rest of Monday, those showers continue to push in from the west, turning particularly heavy across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. But they will gradually start to ease from the southwest, so turning a little bit drier here through later on Monday and into the early hours of Tuesday morning. So there will be some clear spells and a bit of a drier start to Tuesday itself. A chillier night compared to Sunday night, temperatures widely dropping in the low to mid-single figures, perhaps a little milder across the very far southwest, but we could even see a touch of frost across parts of Scotland. Those dry conditions to start on Tuesday don't last long as this next system pushes in from the west through the day on Tuesday, bringing some particularly heavy rain to Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland, into northwest England and Wales as well, which could lead to some further flooding after we've already seen that rain from Storm Isha. Strong winds will also accompany this, as well as those mild temperatures, so temperatures generally remaining above average for the time of year.
Looks like things are heating up. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News. Wake up to the headlines with Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. We treat you to the day's biggest stories before anyone else, 7 days a week. You can catch up on everything you need to know before you've even had your kippers. Headliners every morning at 5 a.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m.
I'm not eating bloody cat. Are you
Delicious.
mental?
Open your mouth. OK, here comes a train.
Reminds me of the scene in Singing in the Rain.
Adam, is that a good one?
Whoa! Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Have a great Saturday night with me, Leo Curse, on this Saturday Night Showdown. It's a crazy world out there, so come and make fun of it with me, my panel of comedians, and a couple of people who actually know what they're talking about. This Saturday Night Showdown is your front row ticket to the clown show every Saturday, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster.
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
GB News, unlike other broadcasters, isn't obsessed with the London-Westminster bubble. We think there's a nation beyond the M25, and that's why we talk about the issues that matter across the land. Join me on State of the Nation, 8 to 9 o'clock, Monday to Thursday, on GB News. Daisy's listening, and you should too.
Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There'll be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good morning. It's 9 o'clock and it is Monday the 22nd of January and we are...
I'm stuck.
Are you okay? Let's get this sorted.
Just you hold that chair. No, do come on me. That's the whole point of the story. Thank you, yes.
We were
Just
doing
trying to-
our exercises as per the Japanese in the break.
Yes,
We
but
weren't
then-
quite back in position, ready for
My bad leg. I
kick
can't
off.
get back in position. Up
But
on
anyway,
up on
we
my
are.
stool.
Normal service is resumed. You're tuned into Breakfast with Eamonn and Isabel.
You see, after 3.5 hours
Sciatica.
here, I get I get swelling around the top of my knees. See, on this bit.
Is this you trying to get me to rub your knees? I'm not doing it.
That's not what you said earlier on. But anyway,
Well, not on camera.
Yes, it's anyway. Just I was caught.
You were caught.
Out of position.
Never
there.
mind.
So let's tell you what's leading the news this morning. Here we go.
So, travel chaos up and down the country. Storm Isha has been hitting. Red and amber weather warnings actually remain in place. And there have been tornado warnings as well as danger to life warnings for wind.
In the USA, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis, he's dropped out of the Republican primary. He's clearing the way now for Donald Trump to take the nomination. The only other person in the race, Nikki Haley, she is trailing behind in third place.
Another health bombshell for the royal family as Sarah Ferguson, Duchess of York, reveals she's been diagnosed with skin cancer just months after her breast cancer treatment.
And today marks 100 years since the first ever Labour government was elected, with Sir Keir Starmer on a more likely path to number 10. Could 2024, like 1924, be a lucky year for Labour?
And you've been very good getting in touch with us this morning. Thank you so much for all of your emails. Keep them coming in. You've got another half an hour. gbviews@gbnews.com. So many views this morning. Actually, lots of you getting in touch about our debate in the last hour when we were talking about whether or not racism at football matches should forfeit the match. Stevie from Belfast says, I don't think forfeiting games is the answer, as other teams could send a handful of fans in to other supporters and get them to chant slurs deliberately to stop the team winning. It will start all manner of dirty tricks, not the answer. Interesting point there. Tony, we need to decriminalise not having a licence. Oh. That's the BBC. That's in relation to the BBC. Sorry, that wasn't clear. Anyway, let us know what you think about all of the stories we're discussing this morning, including Storm Isha.
Well, Storm Isha, winds of up to 90 miles an hour all around the country. The Met Office has warned of danger to lives from flying debris, Many of you experiencing power cuts and also flooding. Transport, as we said earlier, in chaos. A lot of train services completely cancelled, so people finding it difficult to get to work today.
Yes, well, the Tornado and Storm Research Organisations issued a tornado watch covering Northern Ireland, parts of Scotland and the Isle of Man.
Well, our northwest of England reporter Sophie Reaper, and there we have our Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie, joins us. I have to say, Dougie, you look as if you're on a much nicer location. I know Northern Ireland was ravaged by that storm last night, but
it's calmer there, isn't it?
Well, poor Sophie looks as if she's still getting it, Dougie. Is it calm where you are now, or not? The sky's certainly brighter.
Yeah, the skies are definitely brighter. It has eased off a bit. It is now a yellow warning, but last night we were doing lives from here in 80 miles per hour winds. I mean, you couldn't even see. I was getting it hard to even stand up, but we are that much further across from yourselves, and the storm does travel across the Irish Sea, so it really, the tail of it has gone past us, but what you've got to watch for is that whip as it comes through, and sometimes you can look at the eye of a storm going over and then the tail of it at the back end of it. But I'm standing in Port Stewart, very northern point of Northern Ireland, and it is much more beautiful here. There's no doubt about that, Eamonn. Even on a good day, but I would say it anyway. But yes, it has caused real problems in Ireland as a whole last night. 235,000 properties without power in the Republic of Ireland, round about 50,000 in Northern Ireland. Lots of trees down, and of course the road workers and the forestry boys are on strike, so that's causing problems in order to get that caught up. But yeah, it's looking at a much better day, but of course later on in the week it's to get a little bit worse again.
OK, thanks very much, Dougie. Of course you would say that, but I have to say it does look very beautiful where you are. Not so much where you are, Sophie. Absolutely in the eye of the storm, I think. Tell us how you're getting on there.
Well, as Dougie just said, it comes over the Irish Sea. This is the Irish Sea that you can see here behind me, absolutely battering the flood defences here in Blackpool. Just a few moments ago, my cameraman's camera was blown clean over by the strengths of the wind. 40, 50 miles an hour still here on the front in Blackpool. Of course, we know that overnight much of the UK experienced similar conditions, peaking at 99 miles an hour in Scotland. We have now been reduced to that yellow wind warning, although it doesn't feel like it here in Blackpool this morning. It still feels as though it very well still should be an amber weather warning for the way the wind and the waves are feeling right now. Of course, with that yellow wind warning still comes danger to life. There's still potential risk to property. There's still potential for power cuts. Of course, we know there's been major travel disruption all over the UK this morning, but people in coastal towns and cities all over the UK in particular are being told to be extremely careful this morning. The streets here in Blackpool, especially here on the flood defences, are completely empty. We've maybe seen one or two people at the maximum. People really are taking this with extreme caution.
Yeah, and I suppose, Sophie, it's as the day progresses, we hear the full story, we see the full picture of the devastation that was caused. And Dougie, from Northern Ireland's point of view, the clear-up operation bound to be hampered. There's branches and fallen trees and all sorts of things like that. But we have a problem. Explain to people what the problem is.
Well, there's strikes in Northern Ireland, and a lot of those public sector boys are not coming into work, and of course those trees are causing problems. And you know, the cutting of trees up, I mean, I cut a lot of trees up for firewood and so forth, but it is a very good skill to have, and you have to know what you're doing with it, or you could end up in a lot of trouble and personal safety issues around that. So yes, there is problems with that. It's going to take quite a long while to get those roads cleared.
Okay, folks, thank you both very much indeed. We appreciate that, but it does seem to have actually calmed down a bit. Sophie can't keep her hair on, and Dougie's got his stuck down so firmly. There's no movement there at all. Just working well. 7 minutes past the hour.
22nd of January, big date for the Labour Party. 100 years ago today, the first Labour government was formed. In what marked political history, Ramsay MacDonald took up the post of Prime Minister.
I remember it well. Our political correspondent, Olivia Otley, has been taking a look back.
I appeal to you to give us during this transition time, a government that will be a union of all parties.
It's been 100 years since the country heeded Ramsay MacDonald's plea and elected the first ever Labour government. The party was founded in 1900, having grown out of the trade union movement and socialist parties of the 19th century. But it wasn't until 24 years later that they garnered public approval and gained power. And spells in the cold soon became commonplace for Labour. After MacDonald's government fell in 1935, Labour was out on its ear until Winston Churchill formed the wartime coalition, making Clement Attlee the first Deputy Prime Minister. Much to the surprise of Churchill and his allies, Attlee then won a landslide in 1945 on a manifesto that sounds very like something we might hear from a Labour politician today.
The crucial question of this election, on which every elector must make up his or her mind, is this: what kind of society do you want?
Attlee's legacy lives on in the form of the National Health Service, which he managed to create despite World War II leaving Britain virtually bankrupt. After two short spells in government in the 1960s and 70s, under James Callaghan and Harold Wilson, Labour came back with a bang in 1997 with the first Blair landslide. Tony Blair brought the party closer to the political centre and abolished its commitment to mass nationalisation of industry. Blair also reversed his party's policy on unilateral nuclear disarmament, and the events of Black Wednesday allowed Labour to promise better economic management under the chancellorship of Gordon Brown. After 3 consecutive election wins and then a stint of falling popularity, Blair made way for Gordon Brown, who governed for just 3 years before losing to the Conservatives in the 2010 election. Labour has been out in the wilderness ever since and endured a spell of bitter division under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership between 2015 and 2019, with a number of MPs leaving the party for good. 5 years on from Corbyn's departure and the party is almost unrecognisable. Now Keir Starmer hopes to make history by overturning the Conservatives' 54-seat majority and securing a landslide Labour victory.
We are ready for a general election. I've had my whole team on a general election footing for some time now.
Could 2024, like 1924, be Labour's lucky year? Olivia Utley, GB News.
That and more in Britain's newsroom at 9:30. Andrew Pearson, Beverly Turner, we say good morning to them. Good morning.
Oh, just giggling about our reaction to Keir Starmer in his flak jacket there and his army fatigues.
They all do it.
Action man.
But yeah, it's a bit cringe, isn't it?
It is cringe.
It all goes back to flipping George Osborne, who was never out of an orange his jacket and a hard hat.
Oh, yeah, and the way they go into hospital with their sleeves.
Rolled
I know,
yeah,
and the tie tucked in. It's so flipping obvious. Talking about this, we're talking about the BBC. They're going to have they're going to stop being able to mark their own card, the culture secretary.
Do you have a problem with the BBC?
I do. It's been biased for years. I assumed, because I rarely watch it these days, I think the BBC's drama output is fantastic, but I think that they can't help themselves in the news bulletin.
Well, Beverly and I used to work on the BBC, and we used to do a radio show on a Saturday morning. Beverly, honestly, I would be frightened to do the same radio show again.
I was quite frightened every weekend with you, Eamonn, but no, you're right. I mean, we're joking, but I would be frightened to be on there now. I think they try to be so careful, they're so terrified. Yep. And yet, ironically, they don't seem to be putting out output, which I certainly don't find any of it balanced. I was woken up to how it felt like propaganda from sort of spring 2020. I can't. I find it very difficult to watch the BBC.
I think you get a certain type of presenter now. I see them all in my head. I know exactly who I'm talking about. But they're like as if they've all been dipped in Dettol. Yeah. They are all lovely. They love everything. They're really nice. There's no opinions from them. And you think, is that really what you want? Is that what you want? Public?
This idea that it was impartiality, isn't it? This is what BBC are now, why Ofcom are going to get involved in BBC, the idea of impartiality. But I think that's quite different to the idea of balance, in a way. I want both sides of every story. I want to hear both opinions. And the BBC certainly don't do that. They might say, well, this is the truth, this idea, well, we say the truth. Well, truth, I'm sorry, your version of events might be very different to my version of events.
The public mistake, if something is not in the way they see it and what their view is of life, they see it as imbalanced, which is not necessarily the case. It's all very
You've also just got to think about what's going on in Gaza and the BBC's outright refusal to call Hamas terrorists. They will now say an organisation prescribed as terrorist by the government, when everybody in the it seems in the world says they're a terrorist organisation, but not the BBC. They know better. Also talking about Fergie, of course, with her cancer, and what's going on.
We're going to
with
be
Ron
talking about
DeSantis.
that next, actually, as well. Guys, thank you. They're at 9:30. And another health scare for Sarah Ferguson. Angela Levin, royal author, next.
Your weekend starts here with Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, 8 till 9 on GB News. Big stories, big guests and big laughs as we get you ready for a cracking weekend. That's Friday Night Live with Mark Dolan. Fridays 8 till 9 on GB News. Bring your own drinks. The admission's free.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens. With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to give you accurate reporting every day. When the news breaks, we'll be there with bulletins on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it.
Headliners. You don't have to bother reading the newspaper. We've got it covered for you. Every night at 11 p.m. and repeated every morning at 5 a.m. We won't send you to sleep like some of the other paper review shows out there.
So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News,
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'd much rather hear what you have to say. So, send in your opinions to gbviews@gbnews.com. Keep them clean, and you never know, I might read them out. With my panel here on Jubes & Co, we debate, we get stuck into the issues of the day on a show where all views are welcome, especially yours. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Tired of the usual focus-tested, pre-prepared Westminster runaround? Well, so am I.
So you want higher taxes?
Is your department to blame for this? Are you rethinking this policy? Every Sunday at 9:30, I'll be sitting down with those in power to get the truth about the issues affecting you.
Let's be honest, we've known about the cost pressures of this project for years, not months.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show, a politics show with personality. On GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I think the most exciting bit for me is talking to people.
People who I think are ignored often by the major news channels. We're going to give news they want to hear. There's a voice there that needs to be heard. I think there's a chance here for a diversity of opinion to be expressed, which you don't find elsewhere. It's really exciting.
We don't hold back. We're free to say how decisions that are taken here
affect us all around the country. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain.
Good afternoon, Britain. Join us, Tom and Emily,
To find out what's happening in the heart of Westminster
and why it matters to you.
Weekdays from midday, we bring you the most compelling stories from across the United Kingdom.
And from your doorstep to our inbox.
That's right, we want to hear from you.
GB News,
Britain's news channel.
The royal commentator Angela Levin joins us in the studio because it's been a week of health woes that we've been exposed to. We've been exposed to it. The poor royals exposed to it as well. Angela, have you known anything like this?
Well, no, it's absolutely extraordinary, isn't it? We haven't... I was looking back. There's never been two royals and one ex-royal who've actually had quite serious things going on. I mean, the King's not, it's common, but I mean, nobody has ever said that the King should say exactly what he's got, especially over a special part of his body. Tell everybody what it is before he's had the treatment. Because you never know exactly what's going to happen when you go and have this treatment. But the amazing thing is that one of the charities that deals with problems like that say they've had 101% more people ringing up and asking for help.
Absolutely, no
which
doubt.
is extraordinary and very brave. Very brave.
This is a very intimate thing
Absolutely.
to talk about. And the thing about it is, men, whether you realise it or not, you'll reach a certain age and this just becomes standard part of your life that you're checked in. Women don't know they're living. Women don't go through
Well, they have
this.
their own bladder-related problems, don't they,
Women
from childbirth
don't
and
go
all of
through-
that. But no, I totally agree. It's terrible.
And breast-related
You don't go through the
problems.
invasiveness of the examination here.
But not this particular one, no.
No.
But with plenty of others, don't worry.
Yeah.
But, you know, actually, look, my limited medical knowledge of prostate problems, but I imagine that it's not easy, if you're suffering with an enlarged prostate, to carry out public engagements.
Well, that's why he stopped.
Yeah.
I mean, as his wife said, Queen Camilla, that he can't wait to get back to work. Well, he's quite well in his mind, and he could have gone somewhere, but it makes it very awkward. You have to keep rushing to the toilet.
Absolutely.
So you can't do that. You've got to be dignified and be able to do it. So hopefully he won't be in hospital long and he'll come back.
You know, this has got to be talked about. It will be talked about. We see the statistics saying that more people are interested in exactly what prostate problems are, and we hope that the King is well and he comes through all of this. He'll probably be in for some treatment this week, we would imagine.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the good thing is that they have been really looking into it for some years now, and they can help people, and they don't have to make it very difficult for them so that they can't have intimate relationships with the female in their lives. You know, before it was much worse, and now it's much better that they can actually help you and you can get
Not as
over.
drastic as it used
No,
to be.
not at all.
The
and
Princess
I suppose,
of Wales.
Well,
sorry?
I was just going to talk about Fergie for a minute, and then obviously we'll get on to the Princess of Wales. But I mean, the fact that I think there's a certain generation maybe that were sun worshippers in a way that perhaps now we're much more aware of the risks. I mean, for a fair-skinned, red-headed girl to be in the sun as much as Fergie
and
was,
her father had this
and
as
with his
well.
family history, it's terribly sad. And she's got the worst kind you can get, although hopefully early.
Yes, well, I hope so. People have said that she's actually handling it very well, but actually she did say on television that she kept waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning thinking that the cancer had gone somewhere else and she must call the doctor straight away. So she's obviously scared stiff. But we do hope that it's been done early enough, because it can be. These little bumps can go all over the body, and it can be very difficult for you.
Angela, do you know her well?
No, I know her a bit.
Do you like her? You can see the dangers with her.
I think she is a little bit eccentric.
Yeah.
In the kind of traditional aristocratic way, though,
Yes,
don't you think?
but she
She's sort of an
means well.
unusual-
I think what's very important with this is
She
that
means
her two...
well, yeah.
Yes, I think her two daughters adore her, and they both work with cancer charities, so they will know the feeling that not just their mother, but that somebody who has got cancer will feel, and they will be wonderful to her. I mean, all the breakup of the marriage and all those things, and the difficulties that the children have faced in the family, they do love their mother, and she is a very good mother to them.
And
I
King
think that's
Charles
very
finally
important.
welcoming her back into the fold at Christmas in Sandringham as well, and then to have this news days later.
So the Princess
Difficult.
of Wales, though.
Yes.
It's a long stay in hospital, a long recuperation, this one.
Well, it's very unusual to stay in hospital for 14 days. If at home you've got the comfort that you could have with someone coming in and looking after you, they could get nurses galore, and the children could see their mother and all that. But she is there for 14 days, and they seem very firm that she won't be doing anything until around Easter, which is a very long time to say.
Recuperate,
yes, and I think that's the most scary of it.
Yeah.
She's very, very thin, but she works so hard and tries so hard that I think it's really very concerning that she's there. She's not the sort of woman who wants to stay in a hospital, really.
Angela, as we know, what we know of Prince William, I mean, he's an anxious person anyway, isn't he, I think? We know he's estranged from his brother. His father's suddenly having this procedure. His wife's suddenly ill. He's the heir to the throne. It must be incredibly lonely feeling at times.
I think it's a very lonely feeling, and I think that he's doing his best because he's got children. I think children can cheer you up for something like that, and he's got the responsibility of looking after them. But for something like that, I think he goes back to his own mother when he became what she called the man of the house, and he had to deal with her mental illnesses and crying and screaming, and he'd put tissues under the bathroom door when she locked herself in to help her. And I think he took that responsibility on when he was only 15 and didn't quite know what to do. But here, he's a mature man, and he will know that his priority is to look after his wife, who has been so wonderfully supportive to him that he's decided, you know, this is the thing that he's going to do. Family first.
Thanks for that big overview, and of course we wish them all well.
We do.
And a return to health as speedily as possible.
Absolutely.
Lovely talking to you. You're very vibrant. You've cheered me up today on this Monday morning.
Always so natty, natty
bit of
dresser.
sunshine.
Just glowed through the screen there. That's lovely. Angela Levin there, royal author. We'll be back from 6 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Up next, it's Britain's Newsroom with Andrew and Bev. Have a lovely day. Bye-bye.
Good morning. Welcome to your latest GB News weather. I'm Ellie Glazier. Storm Isha brought some very wet and windy weather across the UK last night, but it will gradually be moving away. However, it will still leave a very windy day through Monday. Plenty of blustery showers pushing in from the west. These likely to be heaviest across Northern Ireland and into parts of Scotland. And for Scotland, we could even see some wintry showers across the high ground. The best of the sunshine across the south and the east through Monday afternoon, and temperatures here we could reach 10 or 11 degrees. But with some strong northwesterly winds, that will take the edge off the temperatures for all of us. Through the rest of Monday, those showers continue to push in from the west, turning particularly heavy across parts of Northern Ireland and Scotland. But they will gradually start to ease from the southwest, so turning a little bit drier here through later on Monday and into the early hours of Tuesday morning. So there will be some clear spells and a bit of a drier start to Tuesday itself. A chillier night compared to Sunday night, temperatures widely dropping in the low to mid-single figures, perhaps a little milder across the very far southwest, but we could even see a touch of frost across parts of Scotland. Those drier conditions to start on Tuesday don't last long as this next system pushes in from the west through the day on Tuesday, bringing some particularly heavy rain to Northern Ireland, western parts of Scotland, into northwest England and Wales as well, which could lead to some further flooding after we've already seen that rain from Storm Isha. Strong winds will also accompany this, as well as those mild temperatures, so temperatures generally remaining above average for the time of year.
Very good morning. How was the weather when you came out this morning?
No storm, but we know that lots of the country is gripped by the storm, so we'll be in some of the worst spots. Storm at the BBC, because they are going to have their output more tightly regulated by Ofcom because of the perception, well, the view, they're biased.
Yeah, is that something you would be on board with at the moment? The BBC effectively mark their own homework. Lots more as well this morning. Don't go anywhere. Packed show.
GB News is Britain's news channel, and now you can support it. All you have to do is scan that QR code that's up on your screen right now, or you can go to gbnews.com/support and become a GB News member. You'll have fantastic benefits. We're also going to organise special events where you as GB News members can meet the presenters, the on-screen faces. Scan the QR code or go to gbnews.com/support. Thank you so much.
Big news, big debates, big opinion. Patrick Christie's Tonight is the week's biggest show. Every weekday, 9 to 11 p.m, we've got the inside track on the day's top stories. There'll be sharp takes you won't get anywhere else. We will set the news agenda, not just follow it, and I want to bring you along for the ride. Whatever it is, we'll have our finger on the pulse. It's news, but it's this close to entertainment. Patrick Christie's Tonight, 9 to 11 p.m, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Now then, Lee Anderson here.